Chapter 21. On the way back, Yunxing kept observing He Yan's expression. "You won't keep in touch with that fan guy again, right?" He confirmed again. "I promise you that I will never keep in touch with him again." He Yan said, "Is that okay?" Yunxing saw that her attitude was firm and felt slightly relieved. Yunxing didn't know what was wrong with him, but he kept on nagging the whole way. He sounded more like a granny than a granny. "It's not that I don't believe you, but that fan guy is too cunning. He's used to lying." Yunxing kept on nagging, "What's so good about that kind of man? You were blind to have fallen for him in the first place. If you ask me, General Fengyun is the one who is truly worthy of admiration." He Yan was listening to Yunxing's words, but they went in one ear and out the other. She paused and interrupted him. "What does this have to do with Xiao Ju? Is second young master Xiao not good-looking?" Yunxing asked. "His bearing was elegant and unparalleled in this world. He really couldn't find anything bad about him." "Oh, good-looking. What about his family background?" Xiao family was a military family. General Xiao Zhongwu, had accompanied the late emperor in conquering the country. He was the late emperor's favorite general. The general's wife was the empress dowager's niece. Eldest young master Xiao Jing, was already a senior official at a young age. The second young master Xiao Ju, was even more outstanding. He was now the commander-in-chief of the Right Army. He was the famous General Fengyun. He's rich and talented. What are his civil and military skills like? 1 in a million, outstanding beyond compare. That's it." Yunxing came to a conclusion. "Isn't such a good-looking man, who comes from a good family, and is different from the crowd, worthy of admiration? If I were a woman, would only admire him in my life." "He Yan. You can shut up." Even though Xiao Ju had many good qualities, but that cold and indifferent temperament of hers that could infuriate people to death really made people not dare to compliment her. What's more, there were many women who admired him. There was probably no woman in Dawei who didn't admire him. Did he look at any of them? No. This person was extremely arrogant, and his standards were as high as his appearance. There was probably no one who could enter his eyes. Was she interested in him? As if. She didn't know what kind of beauty the girl he would choose in the future would be, a peerless beauty that would put the birds to shame. He Yan began to look forward to it. At this moment, Yunxing suddenly stopped and asked, "What's going on in front?" Not far away, on a stone wall by the roadside, there was something that looked like a notice. Many people gathered in front of it. He Yan and Yunxing walked a few steps closer. When they saw clearly what was written on the paper, they understood and said, "Turns out it's a conscription document. Hasn't it been a long time since the last conscription? Why would they suddenly conscript?" Yunxing was suspicious. He Yan understood. She and Xiao Ju had spent a few years settling the conflicts between the western Chang and the southern barbarians, but they had neglected the neighboring country, Yuchuo. Yudo had taken advantage of the past few years to develop and expand, and they could no longer hide their wild ambitions. After she married into the Su family, she had been paying attention to the northwest stronghold. This conscription was probably to station at Liangzhou and train the new soldiers. Yunxing looked at it and suddenly tore off one of the conscription notices on the wall and put it in his pocket. He Yan asked curiously, "What are you doing?" "Nothing. I just want to keep it as a memento." Yunxing mumbled, "It's a pity that I can't go on the battlefield to kill the enemy yet. If I were a little older and stronger, I would also want to join the army." He Yan heard this and laughed. "Joining the army is not a simple matter. You have to suffer the pain of the wind and sand, and you have to constantly watch the people around you sacrifice themselves. On the battlefield, you have to be prepared to fall at any time. You don't even dare to kill fish, how can you kill people?" Yunxing was speechless. After a while, he said, "You say it as if you've been there before." He Yan walked with him back home, but only lowered his head and smiled. Of course, she had been there before. Speaking of which, at that time, she was about the same age as He Yunsheng. At that time, the Fuyua army was recruiting soldiers to go to Mo County. She had a big quarrel with He Yuansheng, so she secretly took some money and clothes at night and put on a mask to join the army. She used the name He Rufei. No one expected that He Rufei would join the army, and the He family also did not expect it. It was not until He Yan won the first battle, was promoted, and received a reward that the news spread to the He family. He Yan's life after joining the army was not as smooth as others thought. As a teenager and a girl, she had to be careful not to be exposed. She also had to compete with men who were stronger than her. On the battlefield, she could not cry or make a sound. She was often scolded by her generals. Sometimes, she could not say anything when her military achievements were stolen. She even had to smile and pour tea for her superiors. He Yan felt that before joining the army, she was still a taciturn, wooden girl who hid her thoughts in the bottom of her heart. After joining the army, she really learned how to grow up. Other than life and death, everything else was trivial. It was good enough to be alive. General Feihong replaced the young miss of the He family. From then on, she persevered step by step. Sometimes, when she thought about it, the name General Feihong was so closely related to her life. So much so that when He Yunsheng put the conscription notice in his arms, she was not as calm as she looked on the surface. He Yan's sudden silence was seen by He Yunsheng. He thought that she suddenly came back to her senses and was thinking about Fan Cheng. When they got home, he carefully warned He Yan again before returning to his room. Qing Mei had already left. The notice that He Yunsheng tore was still on the table. Under the light of the oil lamp, the thin paper fell heavily on He Yan's heart. After being busy with the He family's matters for so long, now that she had the money and He Yunsheng had found the school, she should also make plans for herself. How to get close to He Rufei was a problem. The current her had no power or influence. She was just a small commoner. No one would listen to her words. In her previous life, when she was He Rufei and when she was young Mistress Su, she only knew how to play with swords and sticks. She did not know anything about conspiracies. Now that she had a new life, she could not do those dirty and sinister things. What did she have? She only had this life. What could she do? She only knew how to go to war and kill the enemy. But what could she do now? He Yan's gaze fell on the conscription notice. Just a few lines of words made her heart surge. It was as if she had returned to the time when she was 15 years old. She carried the money and cloth bag, took advantage of the night, ran to the conscription tent and wrote her name. From then on, her military career began. Everything had to start all over again. This was the worst way, but also the best way. She wanted to start all over again with the name He Yan. Chapter 22. For the next 10 or so days, everything was calm and peaceful. The roof of the house was repaired and the quilt was changed. He Yan also went to find a servant for He Yunsheng. Normally, the servant would help He Yunsheng carry things and run errands. Qing Mei would also have a companion to talk to at home. He Yunsheng had already handed over the school supplies to his teacher and started going to school every day. He Yan was left alone in the house. He Sui wasn't home, so only Qing Mei accompanied him. He Yan could openly practice swordsmanship in the courtyard, practice with a branch that he picked up. Her skills were engraved in her mind, but her body was really weak. As long as she stumbled a little, the bruises would be very obvious. Moreover, she didn't have much strength. Although He Yan had deliberately practiced a lot, compared to before, she was still too weak. It wasn't good to go to the battlefield with this body. He Yan sighed in his heart and put down the branch. Young lady, young lady. Qing Mei trotted in, someone came to deliver something again. He Yan frowned, why did they come again? This servant also doesn't know. They left after putting down the things. Qing Mei was in a difficult position. Young lady, what should we do now? When young master comes back from school and sees this, he will definitely be angry. The people who came to deliver the things were none other than the Fan family's servants. Ever since the day after she saw He Yan in the tailor's shop, Fan Chen would send people to deliver things every few days. If it wasn't rouge, face powder, silk, satin, jewelry, or tonic soup, He Yan would always ask the Fan family's servants to return the things. He Yunsheng ran into her several times and flew into a rage. He Yan's ears were about to grow calluses. Because of this, He Yan didn't go out these days. If he met Fan Qing again, He Yunsheng would probably go to the Fan family's house and tear the roof off. Today, they were even more excessive. They actually left after putting down the things. What was the meaning of this? Was he so sure that she would accept it? He Yan said, "Throw it out." But, Qing Mei said awkwardly, "They're all expensive silk jewelry. It's not good to throw them out." He Yan felt a headache coming on. Heavens above, she had lived like a man in her previous life and had never met such a persistent pursuer. Even though she later returned to the He family as a woman and got engaged to Su Zhiheng never overstepped the bounds. He even kept a distance from her, not to mention fawning on her so passionately. She didn't know how a girl would deal with this kind of situation. What if the Fan family doesn't take responsibility for such a valuable item? He Yan sighed and said, "Then I will personally return it to them." Qing Mei widened her eyes. "Miss, are you going to the Fan family's door? Do you have any other good ideas?" He Yan said, "Why don't you pack up and come with us? This servant also wants to go." Qing Mei shivered. "Of course." He Yan looked at her strangely. "I can't remember the way to the Fan family." She wasn't the real Miss He, so she didn't even know where the Fan family's door was. Naturally, she had to find someone to lead the way. However, looking at Qing Mei's lingering fear, it was obvious that the last time they went to the Fan family, it wasn't a good scene. Qing Mei was indeed worried. She still remembered the last time they went to the Fan family. He Yan's eyes were red and he almost killed himself in front of the Fan family's door. At that time, the old servant of the Fan family looked at them and said, "People should know their own status. Don't always think about climbing up the social ladder. Don't always stare at the impossible. Otherwise, you will fall and become a joke." The sarcasm in her words was really harsh. In the end, He Yan couldn't catch his breath and fainted. He Sui asked the doctor to come back and take a look. The doctor said that it was a heart attack caused by anger. At that time, everyone thought that He Yan would be unable to recover from this setback. They didn't know how to live in the future. They didn't expect that when they woke up, their young miss would seem like a different person. She didn't mention Fan Qing at all. Even though she mentioned him now, Fan Qing came to pester her. She looked as if she wanted to make a clean break with him. Qing Mei was a bit gratified, but also a bit worried. He Yan patted her shoulder and comforted her. "Don't worry. No one will bully you." Qing Mei inexplicably felt relieved. The two of them went out together. The Fan family's residence was very far from the He family's residence. They walked for a long time before they arrived. Qing Mei pointed at the vermilion door of a residence and said, "This is the Fan family." He Yan thought for a moment. "It's not convenient for me to go. You take these things and give them to the guard. Tell him that Master Fan ordered them to be delivered here." "They must be delivered to Master Fan." Qing Mei nodded. "This servant understands." He Yan hid behind a pillar facing the street. He watched as Qing Mei walked to the guard's side. She said a few words to the guard, handed the basket of gifts to the guard, and then returned to his side. She smiled and said, "This servant has told you everything." "Well done," He Yan said. "Let's go back." In the Fan family's main residence, because they had just gotten married, the decorations inside were still bright red. The Fan family's grandmother, Tang Ying, was the eldest daughter of the manager. She had been spoiled since she was a child. Her temperament was arrogant and domineering. Because of her relationship with official Tang, everyone in the Fan family doted on her. Today, she had married into the Fan family for only a few months, but she had already become the head of the household. Everyone in the Fan family was her people. A manservant knocked on the door. "Come in." Tang Ying was sitting on the soft couch, admiring the embroidered noodles that had just been made. After the manservant entered, he first knelt down and kowtowed to Tang Ying. Then he said, "Young mistress, a maidservant came by just now and brought in a basket. She said that she wanted to give it to the young master." When Tang Ying heard this, she paused and looked at the manservant. "Maidservant? What basket? Bring it over and let me see." The manservant brought the basket forward. Tang Ying grabbed it and flipped it over a few times. When she saw that it was filled with women's silk fabrics, rouge, and face powder, she was unable to restrain her anger. "What is this?" The manservant mumbled and didn't dare to speak. The personal maidservant next to her said, "These are all women's things. Young mistress, the young master doesn't usually use these things. It must be that he wanted to curry favor and someone returned it to him." Tang Ying suddenly stood up and messed up the porcelain cups on the table. The porcelain shattered on the floor. Her expression was fierce. "Fan Cheng, that bastard. Young mistress, the most important thing now is not to investigate the young master. We must not act rashly and alert the enemy," the personal maidservant reminded her. Tang Ying calmed down a little and said, "You're right. There's no such thing as guarding against thieves for 1,000 days. If she was from a good family, how could she hook up with Fan Cheng? I think that slut is just loosening the reins in order to grasp them better. Despicable." She ordered the manservant who had his head lowered and didn't speak. "For the next few days, follow Fan Cheng and see where he goes and who he meets. I want to see what kind of vixen has bewitched his heart. Bring me to that slut. I will definitely make this adulterous couple pay the price." The manservant nodded in agreement and retreated. The maidservant guided her patiently. "Young mistress, for the next few days, you must not show any signs. Otherwise, the young master will find out and hide that woman." "I know." Tang Ying secretly clenched her fists. "In the past, I only dismissed his close concubines. But now, looking at his appearance, he's so fearless. He doesn't put me, his wife, in his eyes. If that's the case, then don't blame me for being ruthless." Chapter 23. The capital was not small, but investigating a person was not an easy task. However, Fan Cheng's concubines had all been dismissed, and he did not dare to visit brothels. He only spent his days in a few places. Soon, the secret affair with He Yen was revealed to Tang Ying. Preposterous. Tang Ying slammed the tea in her hand on the table. "When I was discussing marriage with him, he already had an affair with that woman. He does not respect me at all. I told my brother and father long ago that this person is unreliable. Now that my words have come true, I am ashamed." "Madam, do not worry," the servant said. "The young master still does not dare to bring that woman back to the manor. It is clear that he still has some misgivings. It is likely that this woman has bewitched the young master and caused him to make a mistake. Madam and the young master have just been married. Do not create any more waves because of this matter and cause others to accuse you of being jealous." "Then what do you think I should do?" Tang Ying said angrily. "Why not start with this woman? She is only the daughter of a guard at the city gates. She is still at Madam's mercy." "You are right." After a while, Tang Ying calmed down. "She is only a lowly woman. She has delusions of marrying into the Fan family and becoming the official wife. I will personally meet her." He Yen did not know anything about the twists and turns in the Fan manor. She was thinking about how to go to the conscription office to fill out the paperwork so that she could enter the military camp and follow them to Liangzhou. He Yunsheng and He Sui would not understand how to find a good excuse for them. If she said that she wanted to make a name for herself, they would think that she was crazy. If she said that she wanted revenge, forget it, that would not do. He Yen turned over. Should he write a letter, just like that year, taking advantage of the dark and windy night when there was no one around to directly run away from home? The conscription deadline was in 2 days. If she did not fill out the paperwork, she would not have another chance. Just as she was thinking, Qing Mei came in with pastries. Seeing He Yan tossing and turning on the bed, she was shocked. "Miss, you have been tossing and turning in bed all afternoon. Did you eat something bad? Shall I find someone to take a look at Miss?" "I'm fine." He Yan waved his hand. "I'm just bored." He Yunxing thought he was noisy at home, but after he went to school, he felt bored. Even if he practiced martial arts alone in the mansion, he would not be interested in it. He Yan felt that people were really strange. She had been a loner in the Su family for a whole year. She was alone all day long, but she had only been in the He family for a little more than a month, and she had already gotten used to He Yunxing's nagging by her side. He Yunxing was probably too good at talking. He Yan sat up and said, "I'm going out for a while." "Miss, where are you going?" "This servant will accompany you," Qing Mei hurriedly said. "It's okay. I'll go get some clothes for Yunxing," He Yan replied. It had already been 20 days. He Yunxing's spring clothes and summer rewards were ready. He Yunxing had already finished school very late, so she went to help him get the clothes. Before she left, she glanced at the conscription notice on the table. After thinking for a while, she put the notice into her bosom. She herself did not understand why she did this. A very, very long time later, when He Yan recalled this day again, she only felt that fate was mysterious. From the moment she picked up that notice, fate's huge palm overturned the clouds and rain, sweeping her into the situation once again. Everything was fated in the unseen world. It was already afternoon, and the weather was good. He Yan followed her memory and found the tailor shop. The old tailor of the tailor's shop smiled when he saw her. "Miss, you're finally here. The clothes have already been made. Is that young master not here?" "He went to school," He Yan smiled and handed over the rest of the money. The old tailor has good craftsmanship. The spring clothes and summer clothes were beautiful green clothes. The style was simple and the material was breathable and light. It must be very elegant to wear. He Yan thought that He Yunxing would definitely like it. She folded the 2 clothes and put them into a bag. When she stepped out of the tailor's shop, an unfamiliar servant came up to her. "Miss, are you He Yan's lady He? Did she meet an acquaintance again?" He Yan sighed in her heart. At this time, He Yunxing was not by her side. No one could explain to her who she was. "Yes." He Yan tried to make herself look natural. When the servant heard her words, she smiled. "My madam is just in front. She happened to meet you and wants to have a chat with you." "Your madam?" He Yan thought for a moment. She was not the real Lady He. If she was an old acquaintance, she would be exposed. So, she declined. "It's a little inconvenient for me today. How about another day?" The servant looked embarrassed. This servant can't make the decision. "Miss, please follow this servant to see the madam. It won't take too much of your time. Moreover, the madam said that she has something important to discuss with you." He Yan was most afraid of a girl being embarrassed because of him. When the servant looked embarrassed, He Yan felt that he seemed to have brought trouble to her. His heart softened. When she heard that there was something important to discuss, she suddenly muttered in her heart. What if it was really important and she delayed it because of her? So, after hesitating for a moment, she said, "Okay, I'll go and see her. But I still have something important to do. I can't stay for long." "Don't worry." The servant led the way. He Yan looked at the servant girl walking in front. Although this girl called herself a servant and looked like a servant, the material of her clothes was very particular and the jewelry was not ordinary. At least, a servant girl from an ordinary family would not have this kind of prestige. She was either a servant girl from a rich family or the head servant girl of a rich family's madam. He Yen felt that it should be a combination of both. His imagination ran wild. When He Yen realized that they had come, they had already walked to a deserted alley. "Your family's madam is here?" she asked. "Our madam has a residence here. She usually doesn't stay here." The servant girl smiled. "Occasionally, she will eat at a nearby restaurant. When she is tired, she will rest here." Oh, as expected of a rich family. The place where they rest was their own property. He Yen was speechless in his heart. If He Yunsheng heard this, he would probably be envious and jealous for a long time. "It's here." Sure enough, the servant girl stopped in front of a residence. This residence could not be considered big. It looked a bit old and there was no one around. There was not even a guard at the door. He Yen followed the servant girl inside. First, they passed through the garden. When they entered the hall, the servant girl suddenly changed her gentle and graceful tone and coldly said to the other side, "Madam, this servant has brought him here." He Yen raised his head and saw a beautiful face with angry eyes and gnashing teeth. "You are He Yen?" This did not look like an old friend who was drinking tea and chatting. "I am." "Madam I am the eldest daughter of the Tang family's main wife, Fan Cheng's wife." The madam sneered and fiercely replied. He Yen came to a sudden realization. Looking at the menacing maids and women around him, he sighed inwardly. This madam seemed to have misunderstood something. What kind of sin did she commit to be reincarnated into the body of such a rotten girl? Chapter 24. "Madam, you seem to have misunderstood something." He Yen muttered to himself for a moment before speaking. It would have been better if she hadn't spoken. As soon as she did, Tang Ying became agitated. She pointed at her and scolded, "Misunderstood? You and Fan Cheng had an affair before I married into the family. After I married him, things were still unclear. Are you happy to be someone else's mistress? I think you haven't changed. You still want to be the mistress of my Fan family." He Yen felt a headache coming on. This madam was truly unreasonable. She looked like a flower with a face as beautiful as the moon, graceful and moving. How could her words be so unpleasant? She sternly said, "Madam, there is no harm in asking around. I did know young Master Fan before, but after you married into the family, I never went looking for him again." "Nonsense. If you never went looking for him, why would he give you something? This is also a headache for me." If Madam could persuade young Master Fan not to do this, this humble girl would be extremely grateful. As soon as she finished speaking, Tang Ying staggered a few steps and fell into a chair. 2 clear lines of tears flowed down her face. "Scoundrel, truly a scoundrel." He Yen looked at her with some sympathy. Even an idiot could see that Fan Cheng wasn't a good match. Even if he didn't find He Yen, he would find another woman in the future. He Yen didn't like young Master Fan, but there were many people in the world who were willing to give their bodies to climb up the social ladder. This official's eldest daughter was more than enough to be a good match for Fan Cheng. With her looks and family background, wouldn't it be a pity to tie her to Fan Cheng for the rest of her life? The servant girls and mamas by Tang Ying's side hurriedly approached her and comforted her in low voices. After a while, Tang Ying finally dried her tears. "You little slut, you're used to lying. How could I believe your nonsense?" she said. "What exactly does Madam want?" He Yen looked at the sky. "It's getting late. I should go back." "Go back." The one who spoke was the woman comforting Tang Ying. "You've already done such a shameless thing, and you still want to go back? Until our madam decides what to do with you, you will have to stay here." He Yen. "You dare to imprison me?" The old woman glanced at He Yen with disdain. "You're from a small family. You don't know any better. How can this be considered imprisonment? Since you're someone that our young master has taken a fancy to, then you're half a Fan family member. As the mistress of the house, shouldn't young mistress teach a servant a lesson? Even if we go to the authorities, we will still be justified." He Yan was so angry that he laughed. How could there be such a serious person spouting nonsense? He Yan's smile made Tang Ying, who was originally hesitant, furious. She only said, "Tie her up and throw her into the inner room. Starve her for a night. Let's see if she's still so arrogant tomorrow." She was, after all, a young lady from a wealthy family, and had just married into her husband's family. She had not had the time to learn those thunderous and merciless methods. If she wanted to vent her anger, she could only tie people up, starve them, and scare them. He Yan breathed a sigh of relief. As long as they didn't use a knife, it was fine. She wasn't afraid, but she was afraid of causing trouble for the He family because of her identity as eldest Miss He. The old women rushed up and tied He Yan up like a little chick. He Yan didn't move from beginning to end. He obediently allowed them to tie him up. Tang Ying looked at him and felt a wave of depression in her heart. After they tied him up, they threw He Yan onto the bed in the inner room. The maidservant asked, "Young mistress, should we leave someone here to guard?" "Leave what?" Tang Ying said angrily. "Just leave her here alone. Let's see if she'll be afraid when it gets dark. If she's robbed by thieves passing by." She revealed a malicious smile. "Let's see if Fan Cheng still wants her." The group of people walked away in a grandiose manner. There was no more movement in the courtyard. He Yan lay flat on the bed with her hands and feet tied. She quietly looked at the bed curtains. She didn't say that the bed was quite soft. The curtains were also carefully made with soft gauze. It seemed that young Mistress Fan treated her prisoner quite well. She suddenly sighed. Different people had different lives. Lady Fan's random residence was more magnificent than the He family's meticulously built house. Moreover, this residence was empty all day. Wasn't it a waste? She let her imagination run wild. After confirming that there was no more movement outside, she finally moved her hands and feet after the time it took to drink a cup of tea. Her hands were a bit uncomfortable from being tied up. However, the way she tied people up was still as messy as if she was tying a dumpling. She tried to reach out and touch the knot. When she first entered the military camp, she had a full 10 days to learn how to untie knots. This kind of untied knot was the simplest. He Yan touched the shape of the knot. After confirming that she could untie it, she reached out to untie it. Who knew that just as she was about to move, she heard footsteps outside. The footsteps were very light. She had excellent hearing and could tell that it was a man. She stopped what she was doing and turned her head to look outside the door. Could it be that Tang Ying was right? Was there really a flower thief? The sound of footsteps approached step by step. He Yan also became a bit nervous. She felt in her sleeve for a long time and felt a sharp bamboo branch. It was too expensive to go to the weapons workshop to make a concealed weapon. Now that she was living frugally, she even had to pick bamboo to cut her own concealed weapon. He Yan thought about it and felt sad for herself. The sound of the footsteps arrived in front of her. The door was pushed open and a person dressed as a guard walked in. He didn't expect that He Yan's eyes were open and her mouth was gagged with a rag. She was quietly looking at him. He was startled and quickly walked over. He whispered in He Yan's ear, "Lady, he doesn't need to be afraid. Young master sent me to save you." So he wasn't here to pick flowers, but to save her life. That guard removed the rag from He Yan's mouth and carried He Yan on his shoulder, saying, "This servant will send you out first." He Yan wasn't used to this position. It made her feel as if she was a captive and was about to be beheaded by the enemy. However, the other person had good intentions, so she couldn't say anything. The guard took He Yan to a carriage. The carriage quickly left the Fan family's residence. He Yan didn't make a sound, which made the guard a bit scared. He thought that when he came in, he would hear He Yan crying and screaming. After all, lady, he was a timid and weak woman. Who knew that when he came in, He Yan was completely fine. Even though her mouth was gagged, the expression on her face showed curiosity and vigilance. The only thing she didn't show was fear. The guard had never seen such a woman and inexplicably felt his heart tremble. Fortunately, the carriage ran very fast. In about the time it took to burn a stick of incense, they arrived. The guard helped Hien out of the carriage. The sky was completely dark. At night, the spring river wasn't as lively as it was during the day. It became quiet and quiet. In this kind of night, there should be many pleasure boats cruising here, singing and dancing, drinking and seeking pleasure. But because it was drizzling and the wind was cold, there were only a few scattered boats floating on the river. A little light from the fishing boats made it seem especially lonely. Hien raised her head. The dense rain fell on her face. It was cold and itchy. She looked into the distance and said, "Why did you bring me here?" The guard didn't dare to look at her face. He cupped his fist and said, "Young master is waiting for you on the boat in front. This servant will send you there." Chapter 25. The small boat swayed on the river. There was no moon tonight, only a few scattered stars. The river reflected the lights by the riverside, and one could vaguely see one's own shadow on the water. The guard rowed the small boat towards the exquisitely decorated boat in the middle of the river. Hien lowered her head and said nothing. The guard couldn't help but look back at Hien. He saw the girl sitting at the stern of the boat, sitting upright. Her hands were tied behind her back, motionless. As if sensing his gaze, she raised her head and glanced at him. The guard shivered, and the oar in his hand almost fell into the river. That glance was really cold. He couldn't describe that feeling. It was like a dead person was looking at him blankly. The sound of the waves on the river was like a dream, making her seem even more ghostly. It was really too strange. The guard was anxious. She didn't speak much, didn't ask anything, and was unusually quiet. Ordinary women would at least ask a question or two at this time, right? But Hien didn't. She was like a quiet puppet, so quiet that she didn't seem like a living person. The water sparkled in the night like a whirlpool, bringing her thoughts back to that day when Wanru's people pressed her head down and she drowned in the pond. In the past, she could swim and was good at it. But today, at this moment, her tense nerves told her that she was afraid of water. She was afraid of falling into this small boat, afraid of being sucked into the endless whirlpool, afraid that she would never be able to break out of the water. She was afraid that she would see the sky getting farther and farther away from her, but she couldn't do anything. She was afraid that this life would come to an abrupt end like her previous life. She was disgusted by her cowardice and fear at this moment, but she couldn't think of any other way. She could only sit on the boat and silently let the guard take her to the magnificent boat. This boat should be a rich family's boat. It was smaller than a junk boat, but much bigger than a fisherman's boat. The guard took Hien to the boat, opened the curtain of the boat, and took Hien in. Then he rowed the small boat away, as if he had received orders and didn't dare to approach. Hien stared at the person in front of him. Fan Cheng had also dressed up meticulously today. His clothes were extremely gaudy and luxurious. Inside the cabin, incense and colorful lanterns were placed. The lights were misty, and the cabin was soft and fluffy. As soon as one entered, they could feel a charming and gentle fragrance. Hien struggled out of the whirlpool in his mind. He looked at Fan Cheng and said, "Master Fan." Fan Cheng walked over and sat her down on a chair, saying, "Ahe, you've been wronged." Hien said nothing. "I didn't expect that woman to be so vicious. She actually kidnapped you and locked you in the house. If I hadn't ordered people to protect you in secret and immediately called for people to rescue you after learning about this, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Ahe, now you should understand my painstaking efforts, right?" Fan Cheng lamented. Hien looked at the ropes around her feet. He shook his head and said, "I don't understand." From beginning to end, whether it was Fan Cheng's bodyguards who took her out of the house, into the carriage, or onto the ship, he didn't untie Hien's ropes. The coarse rope had long since abraded her wrists, but she didn't feel any pain. She was just speechless. I was afraid that you would misunderstand me and refuse to get on the ship. That's why I didn't untie you. Fan Qing followed her gaze and hurriedly explained. Although he said this, he didn't do anything else. We're on the ship. He Yen smiled. I won't run. You can untie me. Her smile was like the morning sun reflecting the snow. It was indescribably bright and beautiful. Fan Qing looked at her in a daze. He thought to himself, my goodness, I wonder how He Yen grew up. She's become more and more moving. She's even more valiant and heroic than before. Thinking like this, his heart itched even more. He reached out to touch He Yan's face. He Yen turned her head and he missed. His smile froze. He squatted down and looked at He Yen. It's not that I don't want to let you go. You need to know your current situation. My wife was born jealous. She definitely won't let you go. Even if you return to the He family today, she will still find a way to find you tomorrow. My father-in-law is a manager. Your father is only a military officer. If you want to find trouble, there will be plenty of opportunities. Let's not talk about this for now. The most important thing is you. You're a girl with no one to protect you. Once she catches you, she will definitely find a way to torture you. I can't bear to see you like this. Fan Qing looked at her affectionately. How can I just watch you suffer? Oh. He Yan's tied hands were slowly undoing the ropes. She calmly asked in return, then what do you plan to do? Seeing that her tone had changed, Fan Qing was overjoyed. Without thinking, he said, I want to hide you in a safe place. Normally, there will still be servants to serve you. This way, my wife won't be able to find you. After a long time, I will divorce that woman and bring you back to the Fan family. At that time, you will be the head wife of the Fan family. No one will dare to bully you. Head wife? He Yen asked. That's right. Fan Qing touched his chest. I swear to you that you are the only one in my heart. If this marriage hadn't been set, I wouldn't have married her. Don't worry, I will only love you in this life. I, Fan Cheng's wife, will only be you. But you will have to wait. He Yen heard this and laughed softly. Fan Qing was stunned. You want me to be your mistress, she said indifferently. If the real Lady He was here, she would have been moved to tears by this vow. But she wasn't Lady He. The onlooker sees more clearly than the person involved. If a man wanted to deceive a woman, he would say any kind of nonsense. Why would Fan Qing want to take her as his head wife? He just wanted to deceive her first. She didn't know if He Wanru looked at her the same way she looked at Lady He when she was focused on Su Zhiheng back then. You. Fan Qing frowned. Master Fan, I've already made myself very clear. Since you're already married, I'll also let go of the past. From this bridge, we'll go our separate ways. I have no intention of being your head wife, so I hope you won't pester me. After saying this, she loosened the knot on her hand and opened it. Fan Qing didn't see the rope on the ground. He looked at her in surprise, then suddenly sneered. He Yen, you really don't want to do things the hard way. I've been coaxing you nicely, but you're still angry. Pester me? There are so many women in the world. Why should I pester someone like you? But the time and effort I've spent on you can't be wasted. Master Fan, you wouldn't want me to give you silver, right? He Yen found it funny. This master doesn't lack money. You can use yourself to repay me. He revealed a vulgar smile. If you serve me well, I might even reward you with some silver. He Yen hadn't opened her mouth when she suddenly heard a furious voice. What kind of nonsense are you spouting? He Yen looked over in surprise. The curtain was lifted, and a drenched person walked in with large strides. It was He Yunsheng. Chapter 26. Yunsheng. He Yen almost thought that her eyes were playing tricks on her. She looked again and confirmed that it was indeed He Yunsheng. He Yunsheng had already walked in front of her and stood in front of her to protect her. With one palm, he pushed Fan Qing far away. How did you get up here? Fan Qing finally managed to steady himself and shouted while pointing at him. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Of course I swam up here. He Yunsheng said. He had just been scooped up from the water and his entire body was dripping wet. He crouched down to untie the ropes around He Yan's feet. How did you know I was here? I was afraid that Fan Qing would pester you, so I sent Shuang Qing back to keep watch. Who knew that I would see you being called away? Shuang Qing was the manservant that He Yan had bought for He Yunsheng. He usually accompanied him to the school. Shuang Qing followed me here and turned around to tell me. I ran and swam all the way here. Fortunately, I arrived in time. He untied the ropes around He Yan's feet and was about to untie the ropes around He Yan's hands. He didn't expect that the ropes around He Yan's hands were loose. He felt that it was a bit strange, but he didn't think too much about it. He immediately stood up and glared at Fan Qing. If I didn't arrive in time, what would this bastard have done to you? Done what? Fan Qing finally regained his senses. He looked at He Yunsheng and smiled fearlessly. Do you think that you can change anything by coming here? There was no one else on the boat other than the three of them. They were probably afraid that they would disturb Fan Qing's mood. Even the bodyguards who had escorted He Yan here were nowhere to be found. They probably rowed a small boat far away and waited for Fan Qing's orders after the matter was over. Your sister will be mine sooner or later. Fan Qing disdainfully said, I think you guys are refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Don't be so shameless. Who was the one who thought of ways to climb into my bed? Now you're pretending to be a chaste woman. You. He Yunsheng's expression changed when he heard that. He pounced on him and punched him. You bastard. Fan Qing was almost knocked down by him. The boat shook violently because of his movement, causing He Yunsheng to stagger. He Yan furrowed her brows. Just as she was about to help, she saw something flash in Fan Qing's sleeve. It seemed to be a silver light. Her scalp tightened as she sternly said, Yunsheng, dodge. He Yunsheng did not know what had happened and subconsciously turned over. Dong! The knife that Fan Qing had taken out stabbed into his clothes. He Yunsheng also broke out in cold sweat and said, You dare to kill people. Why wouldn't I dare? Fan Qing's expression was ferocious. If the son of a military officer dies, then so be it. When you're dead, I'll enslave your sister and make her my plaything every day. When I'm tired of her, I'll sell her to the building. He laughed. He Yan's eyes flashed with a trace of fierceness. She did not touch Fan Qing because she was afraid of bringing trouble to the He family. But now, it seemed that whether she did or not, Fan Qing would not leave the matter at that. He Yunsheng was also furious. He simply turned around and slammed his head into Fan Qing's stomach. Fan Qing was caught off guard and was knocked down. The boat swayed and fell to the ground. He opened his mouth and was about to call for help when He Yan shouted, Don't let him make a sound. Then she flew forward and stuffed the handkerchief on the table into Fan Qing's mouth. Fan Qing's mouth was gagged. He Yunsheng had already ridden on his back and started punching him. He was originally a youth and had great strength. Although Fan Qing's mouth was fierce, how could he really be his opponent? Gradually, he stopped struggling. Yunsheng, that's enough. He Yan stopped him. If you continue hitting him, he'll die. It's good that he's dead. He Yunsheng gritted his teeth. If he's dead, he won't miss you. Then the He family will be in trouble. He Yan pulled his hand away. Get him up first. He Yunsheng climbed up from Fan Qing's back. Fan Qing faced the ground and did not move. He Yunsheng stretched out his leg and kicked him. Get up, don't play dead. Fan Qing still did not move. You're dead after just 2 hits. You really know how to extort people. He Yunsheng mocked and wanted to kick Fan Qing up. But when he moved, he suddenly saw a red cloud gradually appear near his feet where Fan Cheng was lying. He said, He Yen was carefully listening to the movements outside. Just now, the boat was shaking, so he didn't know if Fan Cheng's bodyguards saw it. But now, it didn't seem like anything was wrong. Perhaps they thought it was Fan Cheng's interest. At this moment, He Yunsheng's expression suddenly changed. He looked at it strangely and froze. After a moment, she crouched down and calmly flipped Fan Cheng over. Ah! He Yunsheng let out a short cry. He quickly covered his mouth and swallowed the rest of the sound back into his throat. He looked in front of him in disbelief. Fan Cheng was flipped over and laid on the ground. His body was soft as if he had no bones. The clothes around his waist and abdomen were already stained red with blood. A bit of the knife's handle was outside, and the tip of the knife was completely buried in his flesh. Just now, when he was fighting He Yunsheng, Fan Cheng took out a short knife from his sleeve. Later on, when the boat was shaking, the knife fell to the ground. He Yunsheng bumped into him, causing him to fall down. Coincidentally, in a daze, the knife stabbed into his own abdomen. Originally, it shouldn't have been that deep, but He Yunsheng still pressed him to the ground and beat him with his fists. As a result, the entire knife stabbed into his abdomen and he breathed his last. He Yunsheng was so scared that his legs went soft. He fell to the ground and said in alarm, He can't be. He Yen stretched out 2 fingers to check his breathing. She spat out 2 words, he's dead. He Yunsheng looked at her blankly, as if he didn't understand what she meant. After a moment, he sobbed and said in a daze, how did he die? What should we do? The boat was still in the middle of the river, swaying and floating. There seemed to be no other light around them except for the lights on the boat. In the dead silence, He Yunsheng's choked sobs were particularly clear. He said, what should we do? What should we do? In the end, he was still a teenager. He had never killed a person, seen blood, and even had to take a detour to kill a fish. Although he spoke fiercely, he didn't expect that he would really take someone's life. He Yunsheng was already panicking. He repeatedly muttered the meaningless words, what should we do? He Yen frowned as she looked at Fan Cheng's corpse. She had killed too many people, but they were all enemies on the battlefield. She had never killed someone like this before. Although she was a little surprised, she didn't panic. She looked at He Yunsheng again. He was in a daze. He seemed to be crying and laughing at the same time. He shook Fan Cheng's corpse as if he wanted to wake him up. He had already lost his mind. Pa! A burning pain came from his face. It was like a wake-up call. He Yunsheng woke up from his confusion and looked at He Yen in front of him. He suddenly realized that compared to him, He Yen was overly calm. Her gaze was as sharp as a sword, piercing through his heart. Her hands were also very steady, unlike his, which was still trembling. Her voice was also cold, with a hint of exasperation. She said, He Yunsheng, wake up. He's already dead. Chapter 27. He was already dead. He Yunsheng stared blankly at the scene in front of him. Fan Cheng's wound was still bleeding. That knife had pierced right through his abdomen. He Yunsheng felt his throat go dry. After a moment, he finally opened his mouth. His voice was still trembling, but it carried a determination to face death. He said, I'm going to the yamen to surrender myself. I killed him. He stood up and walked forward in a daze. However, he had only taken 2 steps when someone pulled him back and he almost tripped. He Yen asked, what case are you going to surrender yourself to? He's dead. I'll pay with my life. He Yunsheng choked out, it's only right and proper. It's not worth it to pay with your life for this kind of person. He Yen glanced at Fan Cheng on the ground. I originally thought that even if today passed, Fan Cheng wouldn't let this matter rest. Sooner or later, the He family would be in trouble. But now, there's one less problem. Now that he's dead, at least the He family will have a lot more peace in the future. Do you still remember what he said at that time? He Yunsheng remembered that at that time, Fan Cheng wanted to kill him. He said, when you're dead, I'll enslave your sister. Every day, she'll be my entertainment. When I'm tired of playing with her, I'll sell her to the brothel. He said such arrogant and conceited words as if it was only right and proper. You should know that Fan Cheng didn't have to pay with his life for killing the two of us on this boat today. Why do you have to pay with your life just because you accidentally killed him? Our lives are like grass, and his life is especially precious. Why? He Yunsheng was still young and hot-blooded. It wasn't worth it to pay with his life for someone like Fan Cheng. I'm not willing either. He Yunsheng heard this and grief filled his heart. He only said, but do we have any other choice right now? He Yunsheng's thinking was simple. He had killed Fan Cheng, and the Fan family had come knocking on his door. He would pay with his own life, and this matter would be settled. He Yen, on the other hand, knew that this was impossible. In her previous life, she came from a wealthy and influential family. Naturally, she knew that for a family like Fan Cheng's, even if He Yunsheng surrendered and paid with his life, the Fan family would not let the matter rest. He Sui and her, as well as Qing Mei and Shuang Qing, would not let any of them off. Come here. He Yen patted him on the shoulder. He Yunsheng looked at her in confusion. You said that you swam here. Are you good at swimming? Can you hold your breath? He Yen asked. He Yunsheng nodded. Sure. Change into my clothes and wait for my message. Jump off the boat, swim downstream, change into clean clothes, and sneak home. You have to be quick, okay? He Yunsheng nodded in confusion, but then he shook his head and looked at He Yen. What about you? He Yen picked up the bundle from the ground. Inside the bundle were the new clothes that she had bought for He Yunsheng from the tailor shop. She said, I'll change into a new set of clothes and lure them away. They referred to Fan Cheng's bodyguards. He Yunsheng was shocked and blurted out, no. How are you going to lure them away? You're a woman. If they catch you, they will kill you. They will torture you. You don't even have the strength to truss a chicken. If you fall into their hands, you will suffer a fate worse than death. He was still rambling on when He Yen pressed him on the shoulder. No, I can shake them off, she said. Under the dim light, the girl's gaze was clear and firm. At this time, she was even smiling. That smile was very relaxed. It inexplicably comforted He Yunsheng's flustered heart, but it also made him want to cry. I can't let you go, He Yunsheng muttered. Listen, Yunsheng. You wear my clothes and jump off the boat. I will lure them away. Let's not see each other for the next 2 days. I have to lie low, so I can't go back to the He family. In 5 days, go to a tavern called Willow Spring House in the west of the city. There is a row of willow trees in front of the tavern. Find the 3rd willow tree from the left and dig 3 inches down. I will leave a letter for you there. We will meet again at that time, okay? He Yunsheng shook his head. I can't let you go, you are not a child anymore. You are a man. In the future, you will carry the heavy burden of the He family. You have to calm down and do as I say. I will be fine. You know, I am fine every time, she said. He Yunsheng was speechless. She was indeed fine every time. Whether it was Wang Jiugue, gambling at the casino, or horse racing at the school ground, she was always able to surprise people. But this time was different. This time, she was carrying a life on her back. You explain to father for me, He Yen said. After a while, Fan Cheng's bodyguards will come. We don't have much time. Hurry up and change your clothes, she said. Turn your back. I will take off my coat for you first. The boat quietly floated in the river. He Yunsheng and He Yen faced each other again. Immediately, the two of them had changed their clothes. He Yen was wearing new men's clothes. Her hair was tied into a man's bun. She looked very handsome and had really become a handsome young man. He Yunsheng was wearing He Yan's long dress. He didn't know where to put his hands and feet. He looked very awkward. He Yan laughed out loud. How can you still be in the mood to laugh at a time like this? He Yunsheng had a lot on his mind. He was in no mood to bicker with He Yan. It's not the time for me to stop laughing. He Yan picked up a cloth from the ground and covered her face completely. Only her eyes were exposed. However, there was a smile in her eyes. You have to get used to this. Get used to this? What was this? Killing people and living as a fugitive? He Yunsheng only felt tired. Along with it, there was a deep sense of worry and fear. When I count to 3, jump down. Do you understand? He Yan said. Don't worry about me. We will meet again. He Yunsheng was about to walk to the bow of the boat. After taking 2 steps, he turned back and looked into He Yan's eyes. You will be fine, right? He Yan rubbed his head. The young man's hair was still dripping with water droplets from the water. It was cold and furry. She smiled and replied gently, of course. Chapter 28. The drizzle of rain seemed to be black as well. The sky and water met. In the gloomy sky, the flames of the fishing boats were bright and dim, as if they were ghosts from the other side. The last strum of the zither faded away, and the night became exceptionally quiet. At this moment, a woman's scream pierced through the long night. Murder, murder! In a few small boats that were gathered far away from the pleasure boat, the guards were sitting together, waiting for Fan Cheng's signal. Suddenly, they heard the mournful screams and were all startled. What's going on? It's already been so long. Why is she still causing trouble? The leader of the guards asked. Young master didn't send a personal message. Let's wait a little longer, someone said. After being Fan Cheng's guard for so many years, the most important thing was to guess his master's thoughts. They were accustomed to this kind of thing. Fan Cheng had been the young master of the Fan family for so many years. Other than the women who threw themselves at him, he had also ruined many good families. Tonight's situation had already happened more than once. Those poor women would be kidnapped to the boat or the outer residence, allowing Fan Cheng to humiliate them. After the matter was done, he would give them some money to send them off. Those women were poor and had nowhere to cry out their grievances, so they could only let it go. He Yan would also become one of them. Originally, Lady He was deeply in love with Fan Cheng, so there was no need for her to go through so much trouble. Who knew that after the commotion at the Fan family's door, she would really become angry and want to break off all ties with Fan Cheng. Fan Cheng's thoughts were aroused. If the soft approach didn't work, then he would use the hard approach. What these guards needed to do was to bring He Yan to Fan Cheng and deal with the aftermath. I feel that something's wrong. The leader of the guards stood up and stood at the bow of the boat to survey the situation. He saw that Fan Cheng's pleasure boat was violently swaying in the river. From the extent of the swaying, it seemed like someone was fighting inside. No, there's a problem, he shouted, everyone get up. There's something wrong with the ship. The rest of the people were shocked and quickly rowed their small boats towards the boat. When they were still some distance away, they suddenly saw a woman running out of the boat. The woman was stumbling and her movements were panicked. It was He Yan. She seemed to be hiding from someone. She screamed and fell into the river. She was quickly submerged by the torrential river, almost without making any sound. Like Sure too, she only stirred up a cluster of ripples on the surface of the water, and then there was no more movement. Young master! The guard couldn't help but call out. No one cared about He Yan's life or death. When the small boat was about to reach the boat, the leading imperial bodyguard used his lightness skill to sweep over the bow of the boat and climb onto the boat. He took a few steps into the boat and saw that there was someone on the boat with his back facing him. It was a man. His face was covered with a handkerchief and only his eyes were exposed. Under the dim lights, his face was blurry. And at his feet, Fan Chen was lying on his back in a pool of blood. The masked man held a dagger in his hand. The Imperial bodyguard was extremely shocked. He didn't expect that there would be another person on the boat. Looking at Fan Chen, he was afraid that the odds were against him. For a moment, he was shocked and angry. Without thinking, he threw himself at the masked man. "You dare!" The masked man sneered and began to fight with the Imperial bodyguard. The sounds of fighting could be heard from the boat. The boat shook more and more violently. The rest of the Imperial bodyguards also caught up to the boat. The masked man saw that there were many people on the other side and didn't continue to fight. He slashed the Imperial bodyguard's sword and jumped into the river without thinking. "Catch him!" The Imperial bodyguard leader shouted. "He killed young master." Everyone followed, but they found that the masked man was very cunning. The Imperial bodyguards all boarded the boat. They thought that he had jumped into the river, but he actually boarded the small boat that they came from. This was the center of the river. Although there were people who knew how to swim, the night was too dark and it was difficult to avoid encountering danger. But the small boat was light and thin, so it moved very quickly with the current. The boat was slightly heavier, so even if several people paddled together, they were still half a step behind the masked man. One in front and one behind, in the drizzle, no one saw the fight in the middle of the river. When they were about to reach the shore, the masked man threw away the wooden paddle in his hand. With a tap of his foot, he jumped onto the shore and disappeared. The Imperial bodyguard leader said, "Leave 2 people to go find the city guards. The rest of you, follow me." Although it was night, it wasn't very late. Spring was coming, and there were still peddlers doing business on both sides of the river. They saw a masked man suddenly rush over from the dock. He came in a hurry and knocked over countless peddlers. Following behind him was a group of Imperial bodyguards. Their murderous aura was very frightening. "What's going on? Why are you in such a hurry?" The peddler who had his stall knocked over didn't dare to say anything. He bent down to pick up the scattered fruits on the ground. "It seems like there's been a murder. Look at the people chasing after him. They aren't ordinary people. The heavens have pity on us. Why has it been so chaotic recently?" The water by the river had a fishy smell. Suddenly, a hand reached out from the water. First, it grabbed the Shirtu on the shore. Then, the whole person was pulled out of the water, bringing with him a fishy smell. Yunsheng's whole body was trembling. He didn't dare to move too early in case he was discovered. He dived under the water for a long time before he quietly swam downstream. At this moment, his face was pale and his lips were purple. He didn't know if it was because the river water was too cold for too long or because he was simply afraid. He was still tightly holding a basket in his hand. Inside the basket were the clothes that Yen gave him in the tailor shop. It was the basket used to store snacks on the boat. Yen put the clothes in the basket and covered him. The clothes were clean and not soaked by the water. He took off the woman's clothes, rolled them into a ball and threw them into the basket. Then, he tied a few pieces of Shirtu to the basket and threw the basket into the river. The river instantly swallowed up the basket. He changed into the new spring clothes. The clothes were very well made and the style was very beautiful. There was also a cloak of the same color, which was just enough to hide his wet hair. As he put on the clothes, his throat choked up. However, there was no extra time for him to be afraid here. Yan's words were still in his ears. "You have to change into clean clothes and sneak home. You have to be fast." He had to be fast. He staggered and took a small path, walking quickly in the direction of home. There seemed to be city guards in the city looking for people everywhere. Yunsheng walked and heard people talking on the street. "I heard that someone on the boat died a horrible death." "Who?" "I don't know. It's the young master of a big family. Didn't you see the city guards looking for people everywhere? There are so many people. The murderer must have wings and can't escape." Maybe they have already caught him. Aya, the rain won't stop. My clothes are all wet. The discussion gradually faded away until it couldn't be heard anymore. Faster, a little faster. A young man in a green robe walked by the street. His spring clothes were still thin. Probably because he felt cold on such a rainy day, he tightened his clothes and walked quickly home. The rain was getting heavier and heavier. The pedestrians on the street who didn't have umbrellas hurriedly took shelter from the rain. The hawkers hid under the eaves and shouted loudly. The pedestrians passing by took a look. There seemed to be no difference between tonight and last night. Sister. Someone whispered to himself. Like the spring night wind, it fell into the drizzle and disappeared without a trace. The young man buried his head and walked forward. He didn't look back. Tears fell down. Chapter 29. He went in that direction. Chase after him. The guard leader pointed at the garrison troops that had rushed over. The garrison troops had enough men and horses, so they chased in the direction he pointed. Fan Chang's other guards looked at the leader. Someone asked in a trembling voice, "Young master is dead. What should we do?" As Fan Chang's guards, they had failed to protect Fan Chang. The Fan family would definitely hold them responsible. If it was light, they would be heavily punished. If it was heavy, they would be angered to the point of losing their lives. Who killed young master? Someone asked. I fought with that person before. He was very skilled. The leader clenched his fists. I wasn't his match. Did they come for young master? Heavens, who was it? Who knew? Fan Cheng had done so many evil things. Since that person wanted his life, it was obvious that they had long held a grudge against him. The girl that had been defiled by Fan Cheng also had parents and brothers. Perhaps it was to avenge their loved ones or something else. The person was already dead. The murderer had been caught. The truth had been revealed. Lady He. Someone finally remembered He Yen. He's already dead. The river was so deep and cold. A woman without any strength would have fallen into it. But so what? No one cared. He Yen was still alive. Perhaps the Fan family would take their anger out on him. It was better that he was dead. At least the He family's matter would end here. If he's dead, then he's dead. The leader said woodenly, it's better that he's dead. With that one sentence, He Yan's fate was sealed. The sound of horse hooves echoed through the streets. Everyone in the city was in a state of panic. A young man in green walked past the ruined temple where the beggars lived calmly. He threw his wet old clothes into the well that had been abandoned for a long time. He had already changed his clothes during his escape. His spring clothes were worn inside. He only needed to throw away his old clothes. He didn't need to wear a headscarf to avoid attracting attention. She touched the wall, and her hand was covered in a layer of dust. She patted her face with her hand that was covered in black dust, and her overly white face immediately darkened a little. She looked like a young man from an ordinary family who usually worked outside. But he was still a handsome young man. The young man walked forward unhurriedly. Behind him, the city guards were arresting people everywhere. He Yen was not as relaxed as he looked. Fan Cheng's bodyguards had fought with her before, so as long as they looked carefully, they would be able to recognize her figure. One's appearance could be disguised, but one's body couldn't be deceived. The capital's city guards weren't useless, so it wasn't easy to hide from them. Even if he ran into a run-down temple, as long as he interrogated the beggars, he would know that he was a stranger. There was also the matter of leaving the city. The city gates must have been sealed at this moment, and for the next month, there would be strict checks when entering and leaving the city. If they searched the houses one by one, they would be discovered sooner or later. What a headache. The Fan family was even more powerful than she had imagined. They had actually called so many people to chase after her. He Yen was not willing to give up his life in vain. He Yan was in imminent danger as the garrison troops came from every direction. All of a sudden, she thought of something and reached into her sleeve to take out something. The paper was already crumpled and wet from the rain, so it was almost impossible to see the words written on it. This was the conscription notice He Yunsheng had torn down from the wall that day. Conscription. The conscription office was in the open space outside the horse track on the west side of the city. Tents were set up there, and many people were filling in the paperwork and undergoing a simple inspection. When the time came, they would set off together. This time, they went to Liangzhou to recruit soldiers in a hurry, so it probably wouldn't be very strict. Even the age of the recruits wasn't at the prime of their lives. Unless the people who were willing to go were extremely poor, who would be willing to go and suffer in vain in a time of peace and prosperity. But this conscription notice came at just the right time. Now that she was a wanted criminal, it wasn't good for her to stay in the capital. If she was discovered, it would be even worse for the He family. Moreover, there didn't seem to be any benefits in staying in the capital. The He family was too far away from her, and the Su family was a high family that she couldn't reach. She still couldn't stand at the same height as them and ask for her own things. It was better to go to the barracks. She should go out of the city with the conscription team. That was where she should stay. There was always a way out. She was still thinking about how to find a reasonable reason to explain her departure to the He family's father and son. Now, she didn't need to think of other reasons, because this was the only way. The conscription would end tomorrow. She just happened to be there the night before the deadline. He Yen smiled, and her mood was unusually relaxed. She no longer hesitated and walked in the direction of the horse track on the west side of the city with large strides. The horse track on the west side of the city was originally a horse farm, but since the conscription tents were set up here, the horses were all evacuated. In front of the long tent sat a red-faced man with a long saber on his waist. Because it was raining, he wore a felt hat on his head. His eyes were like copper bells, and he was imposing without being angry. He was dozing off intermittently. The conscription was coming to an end. After tomorrow, the newly recruited soldiers would follow them to Liangzhou. At this time, those who were willing to go had already come to cast their names, so there were no new people. He Yen walked forward, but the man didn't even lift his eyelids. He Yen could only say, "Big brother, has the conscription ended?" The big man looked her up and down and said slowly, "No." "That's good." He Yen was happy. "I'm here to join the army." "You?" The red-faced man showed a picky expression and said, "Brother, how old are you this year?" 16. 16. The man said in a low voice, "Your body doesn't look like 16. Usually, you don't do any heavy work at home, right? Joining the army is not a joke. If you are joking, go back early. Don't waste my time." "Big brother, I really want to join the army." He Yen thought about the brothers who came out of the barracks in the past, and imitated their mournful expression, "There is no one at home, and I can't survive. If I don't join the army, I can only sell myself as a servant. It's better to go to the battlefield. Either I die on the battlefield, or I get a merit and can change my way of life. Besides, big brother." She leaned closer and whispered, "Now that there is a sudden conscription, I'm afraid that there is not enough manpower. It's better to have one more person, and we can make up a round number." The man was moved by her words, and he thought that it was reasonable. He just wanted to quickly gather enough people to complete the task, so he said, "Okay, okay. If you want to die, I won't stop you. But let me say the ugly words first, the barracks is not a place for pleasure. If you can't survive and want to be a deserter, you will be punished according to military law." "I won't be a deserter." He Yen vowed. The red-faced man sneered. He had seen a lot of young people like this. When they came, they were full of confidence. If they really went to war, they would be the ones who peed in their pants. "Then you fill in this document." He handed the document to He Yen. At the outskirts of the horse farm in the west of the city guards turned their horses around. In front of them was the Yangzhou recruitment tent, so there was no need to continue forward. He Yan scribbled down 2 words. This time, she used her own name. He Yan. Chapter 30. He Yan's handwriting was quite good. When the red-faced man saw it, he asked, "Can you read?" "I've learned a little." He Yan replied modestly. Most of the people who wanted to join the army were strong men. Only a few of them were literate. The red-faced man's expression softened as he looked at her and said, "You should go to the back of the tent to read first. Once you've passed, you'll receive a document and sign it. Then, you'll be registered as a soldier." He Yan thanked him and went to the back of the tent. This tent was closer to the inside of the horse farm and the tent was also large. He Yan lifted the curtain and went in. Inside, there was one person standing and one person sitting. A chubby, bare-chested man was sitting on a stool and putting on his shoes. He smiled and asked the person standing, "How is it? Is my body strong enough?" He Yan pretended not to see him and walked in without looking sideways. When the chubby man saw her, he was surprised and said, "Such a weak person can also join the army?" The doctor in charge of reading urged him, "Hurry up and put on your shoes. I want to check the next person." The chubby man left. As he walked, he looked back at He Yan with a puzzled expression. "Come here." The doctor said, "Take off your clothes and stand here." He Yan, when joining the army and entering the barracks, they had to check their bodies to see if they were handicapped or infected. He Yan was almost exposed when she joined the Fuyue army in her previous life. In this life, she was already prepared. She took out a silver coin from her sleeve and held the doctor's hand. Then, she stuffed the silver coin into the doctor's hand. The doctor was startled. He frowned and looked at her. "This, doctor, I won't hide it from you. I have an unmentionable disease." He Yan lowered her head. She looked embarrassed and said, "It's because of this that I'm not well liked and often bullied. I can't stay at home anymore, so I came out to join the army. Right now, I really don't want my flaws to be seen by others. I hope the doctor can make things easy for me. In the future, even if I die on the battlefield, I will remember your kindness and repay you even if I have to work like an ox or a horse in my next life." Dr. Zhue thought that He Yan was going to say something like an illness, but he didn't expect it to be a hidden illness. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. He was stunned for a while, and when he looked at He Yan again, there was some sympathy in his eyes. He looked young and handsome, but he was actually a cripple. What a pity. No wonder he joined the army. Even if he did something else, he wouldn't be able to accomplish anything in this lifetime. Pinching the silver in his hand, it felt heavy. He Yan was full of vigor and didn't seem to be sick. Seeing this, Dr. Zhai said, "Since that's the case, I won't force you. You can go now. When you live with others, be careful. Don't be seen by others. If you're discovered, don't blame me." "Thank you, doctor." He Yan cupped his fists in gratitude. He Yan heaved a sigh of relief after passing the test so smoothly. When she came out of the tent, she saw the fat man sitting on the sure-too beside the horse field. He was stuffing a sesame seed cake into his mouth. When he saw her, he waved at her, as if he was greeting her. He Yan thought for a moment and walked over. "Little brother, I just saw you inside." The fat man finished the sesame seed cake in his hand in 2 or 3 bites. There were still sesame seeds on the corner of his mouth. He asked, "Are you here to join the army?" He Yan nodded. When she saw the sesame seed cake left in his hand, she felt a bit hungry. She hadn't eaten anything since the afternoon. After being chased, her stomach was already rumbling with hunger. "Are you hungry?" The fat man saw her staring at his hand, so he reached out his hand. "Here, take it and eat. I just ate 5, so I'm full." She was really hungry, so He Yan didn't refuse. She took the cake and said that she was hungry. Then, she ate it in big mouthfuls. You're so thin and weak, yet you're here to join the army. How can your family be at ease? The fat man muttered, you don't even look as brave as my 10-year-old brother. He Yen swallowed a mouthful of sesame seed cake and took a moment to answer, well, I just look thin and weak, but I have a lot of strength. I'm 16 this year. Why did you join the army? The fat man asked, you don't look like a rough person. My family has fallen, and I'm at the end of my rope. He Yen only said 8 words. The fat man had a look of understanding and said sympathetically, life is unpredictable. Little brother, you don't have to worry too much. In the future, you can follow me and be my little brother. I will protect you. Thank you, big brother. He Yen answered smoothly. This big brother pleased the fat man. He smiled and said, my surname is Hong Shan. You can call me Brother Shan in the future. Little brother, what's your surname? My surname is He. He Yen. As in firewood. He. This surname is rare. In the future, I'll call you He. Okay. He Yen nodded. While they were talking, she had already finished the sesame seed cake. She wiped her mouth, found a former stable, and sat down leaning against the railing. When Hong Shan saw this, he asked curiously, little brother, you're not going home? I'm not going back. He Yen supported her head with both hands. I'm staying here. The sympathy in Hong Shan's eyes deepened. He sat down next to her and said, I have nowhere to go. Let's stay here for one night. After tomorrow, we'll set off together. That would be great. In the distance, the torches outside the tent were flickering in the rain, as if they were going to be extinguished in the next moment. The two of them sat in the darkness in silence, each thinking about something. I wonder how He Yen is doing in Yunsheng. Did he reach home safely? He Yen thought to herself and unknowingly fell asleep. Countless things happened in the capital every day. No one paid attention to the affairs of the poor, but if it was related to the rich, everyone would know. Last night, there was a murder case on the Chunlai River. The young master of the Fan family in the capital was killed on a boat. The murderer escaped and disappeared. Until now, the culprit had not been caught. At that time, the daughter of the guard at the gate was also on the boat. She was also killed by the murderer and drowned in the river. With such a cruel murderer in the capital, everyone was in a state of panic. However, there were also people who clapped their hands and cheered. The young master of the Fan family had always used his family's power to deceive and defile the common girls. The girls did not dare to speak out when they suffered losses. Now that someone was enforcing justice, perhaps the heavens had opened their eyes. The He family was in a miserable state. He Yen seemed to have aged 10 years overnight. He sat in the hall in a daze, like a clay statue. Qing Mei and Shuang Qing hid in the courtyard. Shuang Qing looked bitter. Qing Mei wiped her tears and whispered, why is it suddenly gone? In the simple stable, He Yunsheng sat next to Xiang Xiang. The fodder was the same as yesterday's. He Yunsheng was not in the mood to add more fodder. The horse was pacing back and forth a little irritably. He Yunsheng was unmoved. No news was good news. At least until now, He Yen had not been caught. He remembered that on the boat, the night rain covered the smell of blood. He was confused and helpless. The girl in the long dress had bright eyes. She touched his head and said to him, you know, I'm fine every time. This time, it will be fine, definitely. Chapter 31. Spring was coming to an end, and even the rain was beginning to have the heat of summer. The last day of the conscription had ended. The long tabs for filling in paperwork at the racetrack had been closed and were replaced by countless small tabs. After bidding farewell to their families, the other recruits had already gathered. After tonight, they would set off for Yangzhou the next morning. The tent was very small, and it was barely enough for a few people to squeeze in. He Yen and Hong Shan sat next to each other. Hong Shan had taken a slightly larger tent, and because they didn't have much luggage, it was quite spacious. From last night to tonight, He Yan had stayed here for an entire day. Here, they would give him steamed buns to eat, 2 at a time. When they settled down in Liangzhou, they would give him more. There was nothing else, except that it was inconvenient to go to the outhouse. He Yan had to wait until it was late at night, when no one was around, to sneak in. As soon as she came out of the outhouse, she walked to her tent and lifted the flap. There were 2 more people inside. Hong Shan was talking to them. Hearing the noise, the 2 men turned around to look. They were probably a pair of brothers, and they looked somewhat similar. They were tanned and thin, and had a kind of honest and handsome aura. They weren't old, the older one was about 16 or 17 years old, and the younger one looked about the same age as He Yunsheng. The older one was probably the older one, and he was taciturn. The younger one was probably the younger one. When he saw He Yan, he smiled and asked as if they were close friends, "This is your older brother He Go?" Hong Shan helped He Yan to recognize a younger brother, and then said to He Yan, "These are the 2 new brothers today. There's no tent outside, so they'll be squeezing in here with us." He pointed to the taciturn young man, "This is Shi Tu." Then he pointed to the young man with a simple and honest smile, "This is Xiao Mai." Shi Tu, Xiao Mai. They were probably brothers from poor families. Otherwise, a better family would have given them good names. He Yan found a place to sit down. With 2 more people, the tent suddenly seemed a little crowded. "Are you from the capital?" He Yan asked. He felt a little thirsty, so he unscrewed the water bottle at his waist and took a sip. Shi Tu didn't like to talk, but his younger brother, Xiao Mai, was very lively. He said, "We live on Xianghuai Mountain and spend our days hunting. The last time we went down the mountain, we saw that they were recruiting soldiers. After discussing it with my brother, we decided to join the army. It turned out to be a family of hunters on the mountain." "Your parents might want you to join the army?" Hong Shan asked. Generally speaking, even if one's family was poor and wanted to join the army, they wouldn't let their 2 sons join together. They had to leave a way out for their family. "My parents are long gone. I grew up with my brother." Hong Shan sighed. "Then you should cherish your lives even more. Why did you come here to join the army? It's not fun to join the army. Don't tell me you." He pouted in He Yan's direction. "You want to make a name for yourself like him, right?" "A real man should make a name for himself," Xiao Mai said naively. "Besides, this time, the commander of the army to Liangzhou is the right military governor Xiao. My brother and I have admired him for a long time. It's our honor to be able to work for him." He Yan was drinking water while listening to them talk. When he heard this, he spat out a mouthful of water and almost choked. Everyone in the tent looked at her. "Who do you think is going to Liangzhou to be the commander?" she asked. Xiao Mai thought she didn't know military governor Xiao, so he deliberately explained, "It's the current General Feng Yun, the 2nd son of the Xiao family, Xiao Huijin." He Yan's heart trembled. How could Xiao Ju go to Liangzhou to be the commander? With his official position, he didn't need to go to Liangzhou. Besides, he had his own troops and horses. Why would he bring a new soldier to Liangzhou? Unless he was demoted. Xiao Ju was demoted. Xiao family in the capital. Xiao family's residence was specially renovated according to his wife's preferences when old General Xiao was still alive. Xiao family's later generations never changed the layout of the courtyard. Therefore, although they were a military family, the courtyard was renovated to be as elegant and unique as a small courtyard in Suzhou. Past the flower wall was the main room. Next to the main room was a pomegranate tree. It wasn't time to bear fruit yet. Looking in from the window, one could see yellow pine shelves full of books. Someone was sitting at the table reading. The young man was fair and beautiful, but his expression was indifferent and a bit lazy. Because he was in his own residence, he dressed casually. He wore a brocade robe with cloud patterns and a green jade belt, which made him look even more handsome. There was a sword hanging on the wall. The color was like frost and snow, sparkling and translucent. Although it wasn't unsheathed, one could see its majesty. The door was pushed open and someone walked in. It was a man and a woman. The man was 70% similar to Xiao Ju. However, he wasn't as cold as Xiao Ju. He was more gentle and bright. He was Xiao Ju's elder brother, Xiao Jing. Next to Xiao Jing was his wife, Bai Rongwei. Although she wasn't a stunning beauty, she was still a beautiful and dignified woman with white teeth. The husband and wife stood together like a jade couple. It was very pleasing to the eye. Huaijin, Bai Rongwei spoke. She put the package in Xiao Jing's hands on the table and said, "These are the shoes and clothes that we prepared for your trip to Liangzhou. Try them on later." Ever since General Xiao and his wife passed away, the Xiao family only had Xiao Jing and Xiao Ju. The eldest sister-in-law was like a mother. In the past, General Xiao's wife sewed clothes for Xiao Ju. Now it was Bai Rongwei. "Thank you, eldest sister-in-law." Xiao Ju nodded. Bai Rongwei smiled and said, "You brothers talk. I'll go see if the soup is ready." Then she left. After Bai Rongwei left, Xiao Jing stared at Xiao Ju for a moment. Finally, he sighed and said, "Huaijin, you really don't need to go to Liangzhou. Recently, Su Jiefu has been targeting you in court. He's looking for trouble with the Xiao family." Xiao Ju's expression didn't change. He only said, "If the emperor listens to Su Jingfu's words, I'll be causing trouble in the capital. It's good to go to Liangzhou for a while. Moreover, there are many suspicious things about father's death. Now that there are clues, perhaps there will be new discoveries." Speaking of General Zhao's death, the atmosphere in the room suddenly became heavy. After a moment of silence, Xiao Jing reached out and patted Xiao Ju's shoulder. "You always think more than I do, but there's nothing I can do for you. Eldest brother's situation in court is much more complicated. When I'm not here, the Xiao family depends on eldest brother." Xiao Ju smiled and looked at Xiao Jing. "Eldest brother, take care of yourself. You take care too." Xiao Jing sighed with emotion. Perhaps in order to lighten the bitter atmosphere, he deliberately joked, "It's not that I don't want you to go to Liangzhou. It's just that you're now 20 years old and it's time for you to get engaged. Of the girls that your sister-in-law helped you find, do you like any of them?" Hearing this, Xiao Ju's smile disappeared. His expression became even more indifferent. "No need. I don't plan on getting married." Chapter 32. The capital had been peaceful for the past few days, but there were undercurrents in the imperial court. Spring had finally come to an end, and after summer had begun, the continuous rain seemed to be endless. The entire city was covered in misty rain. Right Army Commander Xiao Huaijin volunteered to be the commander and led the new soldiers to the Liang Province Guard. After Xiao Huaijin left, the situation in the imperial court changed again. The crown prince's faction was elated, and the word "happy" was almost written on their faces. The common people still had no way of coming into contact with the matters of the imperial court, and they continued to live their daily lives. A few days ago, the capital Fan family's young master had been killed, and the murderer had still not been found. The Fan family had searched everywhere for the murderer, but they had failed, so they vented their anger on Lady Fan. Who would have thought that Madame Fan's family, the Minister of Household, was not an ordinary person? After waiting for a long time, after the 7th day of Fan Cheng's death, he forced Master Fan to write a letter to release his wife and take his daughter back to the manor. Tang Ying was in her prime, and her husband had died shortly after she married. How could the Tang family allow her to become a widow at such a young age? Naturally, they had to plan for her future. She and Fan Cheng had no children, so the Fan family could do nothing. In comparison, He Yan, who had been killed along with Fan Cheng and drowned in the Chunlai River, had become an insignificant supporting character in this incident. He didn't even have the right to be discussed. Other than the He family, no one mentioned him. It was as if He Yan had never existed in this world. He Yunsheng went out wearing a bamboo hat as the rain grew heavier. After He Yan's accident, he had temporarily stopped going to the academy. He Yan had told him to go to the Willow Spring residence to collect the letter in 5 days. Today was already the 10th day, and He Yunsheng finally found some time to go out. He was afraid that the Fan family would be waiting outside to observe his movements. He Yan had fought so hard for the opportunity for the He family, so he couldn't let it be ruined in his hands. In the past few days, he had already looked around the house. The Fan family watching the He family had all withdrawn, and only then did he feel at ease to go out. He changed into an old set of clothes so that he wouldn't attract any attention. He lowered his head and wore a bamboo hat as he walked out of the back door, braving the rain. He Yunsheng lived a life worse than death for the past 10 days. He couldn't fall asleep every night. He wanted to hear news about He Yan, but he was also afraid to hear news about He Yan. Luckily, 10 days had passed and the authorities had not caught He Yan yet. Perhaps from another perspective, He Yan was safe. But he couldn't help but think, He Yan is still in the capital, where can she go? Other than the He family, she didn't have any other friends, so she was bound to wander about. Did she eat well? Did she sleep well? Did she get bullied? Thinking of this, He Yunsheng quickened his pace. The reason why Willow Spring Restaurant was called Willow Spring Restaurant was because there was a spring at the back door of the restaurant. Beside the spring was a row of willow trees. There were not many people in the tavern on this rainy day. He Yunsheng went in without anyone noticing. He still remembered what He Yan said at that time. Go to the west of the city. There is a tavern called Willow Spring Restaurant. There is a row of willow trees in front of the tavern. Find the third willow tree from the left and dig 3 inches down. I will leave a letter for you there. He Yunsheng squatted down. He dug 3 inches down from the third willow tree from the left. The soil that he dug out was still wet from the rain. As he dug, his fingers touched something hard. He Yunsheng's heart skipped a beat. His hands moved even faster. A moment later, he dug out an oiled paper bag. He didn't immediately open it to take a look. He only put the oiled paper bag into his arms and quickly filled it with the soil he dug out. Then he turned and left the tavern. After he left, he trotted back home. When he got home, He Sui wasn't there. He Yunsheng went back to his room, locked the door, and took out the paper bag. He had been holding it in his arms, so the paper bag wasn't wet. It was well protected. He Yunsheng opened the paper bag with trembling hands and saw what was inside. There was a piece of clothing and a letter. He Yunsheng opened the letter first. The letter was probably written in a hurry. The paper was crumpled and the handwriting was sloppy. It was probably flour paper used to wrap snacks for others. There were still oil stains on it. On the side without patterns, there were a few lines of flamboyant words written with a brush. I have joined the army and am going to Liangzhou. The mountains are long and the rivers are wide. After the cold spring, the hot summer follows. I hope you will cherish yourself. When we meet again in the future, please take care. He Yunsheng stared blankly at the few lines of words as if he didn't recognize them. After a moment, he finally understood. He gritted his teeth and went to take the clothing. It was a summer shirt made by the old tailor. When He Yan parted with him that day, they each wore one in order to disguise themselves. This one was neatly folded by He Yan and sent back. The material was very cold. When he touched it, he seemed to see the cool smile on the girl's face that day and her comforting words. Don't worry, we will meet again. The room was silent. After a moment, someone choked with sobs. Liar, He Yan, who was called a liar, didn't know that he was being scolded behind his back. Speaking of which, they were already on the way from the capital to Liangzhou. This time, they recruited less than 20,000 soldiers. There were new recruits on the way. Now that summer had arrived, the journey became difficult. It was fine to leave early, but by noon, they were sweating profusely. Hong Shan sat on the grass, eating dry food and picking up a leaf to fan himself. It was so hot that he grimaced. Damn it, the weather is too hot. When will we reach the end? It will take more than 2 months to reach Liangzhou from here. He Yen poured water into his mouth. Take it slow. I miss the mung bean soup in the capital. Xiao Mai smacked her lips. Put it in a bowl and soak it in the well for a few hours. Sprinkle some sugar on it. It's sweet and cold. It really quenches thirst. His description was so detailed that the people who listened swallowed their saliva. Don't talk about it. We're soldiers. Don't talk about mung bean soup. It's good enough that we don't starve. Hong Shan sighed. If we want to eat it, we may have to wait until we receive a reward and get promoted. Then we can eat it, just like military governor Xiao. He Yen laughed in his heart when he mentioned Xiao Ju. She joined the army and followed everyone to Liangzhou. They traveled day and night and slept in a tent in the wilderness. Even so, she didn't even see Xiao Ju. He and his men rode at the front of the team. The tent they stayed in at night was different from the tent of the soldiers. In addition, He Yen knew that Xiao Ju was the most fastidious person when he was in the Xianchang mansion. The second son of a Xiao family was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Even the princess was not as fastidious about his food and clothing. Thinking about it, even if they were traveling now, his life was much better than theirs. They were both young generals, but they had different fates. Now that she was reborn, she had actually become a soldier under his command. He Yen sighed. Who would believe it if he said it out loud? She still wanted to earn military merits and get promoted quickly. However, Xiao Ju was very picky. It was not easy to become a soldier under him. What could she do? She had already been registered in the military register. She could only look at it as she walked. Chapter 33. The 2-month journey from the capital to Liangzhou was not an easy one. They had to clear a path and fill a bridge when they met a river. By the time they reached Liangzhou, everyone was exhausted and had lost a lot of weight. He Yen sat by the lake and looked at herself in the water. Lady He used to have fair skin, but after 2 months of traveling under the sun, she didn't even need to wipe the dust off her face. She was the same color as Xiao Mai. If the real Lady He came back now, she would definitely want to strangle herself. She suddenly had this thought. She found it funny and laughed. Why is a He-Go laughing so happily? Xiao Mai asked. Hong Shan glanced at He Yen by the lake and said with understanding, if we walk for another half a day, we'll be able to reach Liangzhou before dark. The bitter days are coming to an end, how can we not be happy? That's true, Xiao Mai agreed and said to Shi Tu, Big brother, are you happy? The taciturn Shi Tu also nodded. The 2-month journey was indeed not a human task. Even though most of the people who came to join the army were poor and suffered hardships, it was still much harder than they had imagined. Some of the people with poor health had already died on the way. They didn't have time to reach Liangzhou and couldn't return to the capital. This was a path of no return. In the evening, the army finally reached Liangzhou. Liangzhou was located in the northwest. They thought it was desolate and barren, but when they arrived, they found that it was quite prosperous. Even though it couldn't be compared to the capital, it was still lively and rich. He Yen followed everyone forward. He thought that Xiao Ju really knew how to pick a place. Liangzhou was much better than the Mo county where she joined the army. When she went to the Mo county, there was nothing there. The people couldn't even afford to eat. The soldiers were the ones who had a really hard time. When they arrived at Liangzhou, they first had to go to the Liangzhou Guards. The Liangzhou Guards were stationed at the foot of Mount Baiyue. There was a large open space at the foot of Mount Baiyue that could be used as a training ground. They could stay in tents at night, but now they were all staying in the Liangzhou Guards office. With so many people, there weren't enough rooms in the office. They could only squeeze a dozen people into a small room and sleep on a large shared bed. He Yen naturally stayed with Hong Shan and Shi too. They didn't have any luggage, so they found a shared bed and relaxed. I saw a river nearby, Xiaomai excitedly said. Many people are bathing in the river. Let's go, too. Okay, I'm already sweating from the heat. Hong Shan took off his coat and was about to run out. Mai looked at He Yen. Brother He, you're not going. The first time Hong Shan invited her to bathe in the river, He Yen explained that she had once drowned when she was young. Since then, whenever she went into the water, she would feel dizzy and short of breath. Hong Shan didn't suspect her. To be honest, He Yen wasn't lying. She was really afraid of water now. But He Yen lay down on the shared bed. Creak. She couldn't help but frown. For a moment, she didn't know if it was because she was too skinny or because the bedboard was too hard. After a while, she could only sigh in her heart. It's easy to go from frugal to extravagant, but difficult to go from extravagant to frugal. She had lived in the barracks for 3 years, but she had only been young Mistress Su for 1 year. She was already used to the soft bed and felt that the bedboard made her angry. Xiao Ju was still the best. His bed should be soft. He Yen felt that it was unfair. She rested in the room for a while until Hong Shan and the others came back. Then, she followed them to the guard's office to eat. Today was the first day. For the past 2 months, they had been eating dry rations and clear water on the road. It was their first meal in Liangzhou, and they finally had a hot meal. Even the simple porridge and buns were piping hot. The recruits were all sitting on the ground and eating heartily. Those who didn't know better would think that they were eating some delicacies. The meat filling of this bun is only a little bit big. Hong Shan complained while licking his fingers. It's not satisfying. It's good enough to have a hot meal. He Yen said, it's better than dry rations. It's okay. I just asked around. There are many wild animals and rabbits on Mount Baiyue. Xiaomai smiled and said, Brother and I can go hunting. If we catch a rabbit or wild boar, we can wash it clean and string it on a branch. Or we can wrap it in a leaf and sprinkle some salt on it. Then, we can roast it. It's delicious. Xiaomai was a foodie. Every sentence she said was about food. Hong Shan became hungrier after hearing her words. He finished the porridge in front of him in one gulp and slammed it on the table. Damn it. I can't wait to go up the mountain now. There's a military order about not going up the mountain without permission. He Yen poured cold water on them. There will be a time when we go up the mountain. Hong Shan didn't agree. After eating and drinking to their fill, everyone simply tidied up. The commander of the training had already informed them in advance that they would gather at the training field at 5 in the morning tomorrow. Today, they would rest early. He Yen followed Hong Shan back to his room in the guard's office. There were already many people in the room. Some were already asleep, while others were still chatting. They couldn't hold back their excitement. He Yen slept in the innermost part of the bunk. One side of him was next to Xiaomai, while the other side leaned against the wall. He heard Hong Shan say cheerfully on the other end, compared to the previous hurried journey, this is the life of an immortal. They had food, water, baths, and beds to sleep in. They didn't have to be exposed to the sun and rain outside. They also didn't have to be bothered by mosquitoes at night. It indeed looked much better than before. Xiaomai said softly, if we train the soldiers here, I think it's easier than hunting in the mountains. And there are so many people here. We can play together. He Yen, silly child. How could anyone say that training soldiers was easier than hunting in the capital? These people were all joining the army for the first time. They only thought that their future would be as easy as tonight. But this was like a prisoner on death row who had to eat a meal before he was executed. After this meal, it would be their last meal. Tonight would be the most relaxing night they had ever spent in Liangzhou. Starting tomorrow, the real torture would begin. He Yan closed his eyes. He would let these silly children have their sweet dreams for a while. Sure enough, the next morning, before the sun had even risen, the loud sound of a horn could be heard from the open space outside the guard's office. "Oh, it's so early. Can't you sleep a little longer?" Xiao Mai turned over and rubbed her eyes. She found that He Yan had already finished dressing and was standing in front of the bed. "Ahigu, why are you so early?" he asked sleepily. "You didn't answer my call, didn't show up at the appointed time, and didn't show up on time. This is called a slow soldier. You will be punished with a military rod," she said with a smile. She didn't look drowsy at all, as if she wasn't tired at all. "If you don't want to be flogged, get up quickly." Chapter 34. On a summer day, it was already dawn. They woke up even earlier than before. It was their first time arriving in Liangzhou last night, so everyone was excited and couldn't help but sleep late. When they arrived at the training field, everyone was sleepy and some even wore their shoes inside out. Shi Tu was fine, but Xiao Mai and Hong Shan were walking while tying their belts. The two saw that He Yan was full of energy and asked in confusion, "He, aren't you sleepy?" "I slept early last night, so I slept enough," He Yan replied. Xiao Mai praised, "You're amazing." As they spoke, they had already arrived at the training field. Because today was the first day, they still lined up according to their previous schedule. On the high platform stood a strong man wearing a red suit. He had thick eyebrows and big eyes, and he was tall like a tree. He held a long spear in his hand and looked very impressive. "Who is that?" He Yan asked. "He's the instructor in charge of supervising our training, Shen Jiaodo." Xiao Mai was a nosy person, so she had already asked around. He Yan nodded, but in her heart, she thought that Xiao Ju would personally come to train the soldiers. She didn't expect that she wouldn't even see him today. Speaking of which, although they were all young men who joined the army and were conferred the title of general, every general had their own way of training soldiers. He Yan wanted to see Xiao Ju's methods and secretly learn from him. However, it seemed that it was impossible for now. "I'm your chief instructor, Shen Han." Shen Jiaodo's voice was like a bell. The training field at the foot of Mount Baiyue was surrounded by mountains, so listening to his voice made one's scalp tingle. "From today onwards, I'll be leading you." He shook the military register. "Now, let's start the roll." The roll call had to be fast. Today was the first roll call. After a few days, the soldiers would be divided into 5, 100, 1 brigade, and 1 division. Then, the appointed 5 commanders, 100 commanders, 1 brigade commanders, and 1,000 commanders would be in charge of the roll call, saving a lot of time. This group of people were all unaffiliated soldiers recruited from the capital. In the past, they had never received any training. After listening to someone call out the soldiers for several hours, they could only stand in the martial arts arena. He only felt uncomfortable all over and moved his body from time to time. Xiao Mai whispered to her brother, "Big brother, Ahigu isn't moving. It looks like a piece of Shi Tu." Shi Tu looked at He Yan. Compared to him, He Yan seemed to be more deserving of this name. She stood as straight as a pine tree with her arms by her side. Her eyes were bright as she looked at the high platform. She didn't seem to be tired or bored. It gave people the illusion that she could still stand like this even after 2 hours. Shi Tu thought of the time when he and Xiao Mai hunted in the mountains. There were wild beasts in the mountains. When the wild beasts caught wild hares, they also hid quietly in the grass without moving. At first glance, they looked like a lifeless piece of Shi Tu. He had hunted with Xiao Mai for so many years. He was fine, but Xiao Mai couldn't help but come down. Why was He Yan able to do it? He heard from the Hong Shan that He Yan joined the army because his family was in dire straits. Looking at his appearance, he seemed to have a good family background. Why did such a person have the patience and perseverance of a wild beast? After all, He Yan didn't need to hunt. He didn't get an answer from his contemplation. The roll call was over. Shen Jiaotou closed the military register book and said, "From today onwards, 100 people will form a team. Each team will have one instructor. You will train here, set up formations, and practice how to charge. Today, I will be teaching you military orders." At this point, Shen Han's face revealed a smile. For some reason, when everyone saw this smile, they only felt a chill in their hearts. Sure enough, they heard Shen Han shout, "You didn't answer the call, you didn't arrive on time, and you didn't arrive on time." This is called a slow-moving army. Those who break this rule will be whipped. Today, you are late by a minute. You should be punished according to military law. However, since this is your first offense, I will be lenient. Everyone's hearts were beating up and down after hearing his words. As soon as they landed, they heard the stern instructor's emotionless voice. "Everyone, carry sandbags and run laps around the barracks. 10 laps. You can't miss a single lap. Each team's instructor will be guarding you. Whoever dares to slack off will be punished according to military law." Everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. The training field at the foot of Mount Baiyue was the barracks. 1 lap was at least 1 li long. 10 laps was more than 10 li long. They still had to carry sandbags. When they woke up early, it was still early and they didn't feel hot. Now, after the roll call, the sun was high in the sky. It was hot and hanging above their heads. Just standing there made them sweat non-stop. They had to run laps under the sun. The surrounding area was suddenly filled with wailing. Xiao Mai said, "He Gu, what Shen Jiaotou said is exactly the same as what you said." "Hey, how did you know that he would say that?" "How did she know?" "Naturally, it was because when she entered the barracks, it was the same situation. Just like the killing stick, the new recruits were first put in their place and let them know that they didn't join the army to enjoy life. Even if it wasn't for this, Shen Han would find some other reason to punish them. Remember more military orders." He Yan patted the young man's shoulder. "It's good for you." Xiao Mai nodded, not fully understanding. Sure enough, according to what Shen Han said, there were so many soldiers and they were divided into teams of 100 people. Everyone went to collect sandbags. He Yan initially thought that the sandbags were the size of a palm, just like the ones she and He Yunxing used to chop firewood in the mountains. They could be tied to the legs. However, when he reached the end, his eyelids twitched. That sandbag was the size of a bundle. It wasn't tied to the legs, but carried on the back. It was heavy to carry and definitely not comparable to her sandbag. "Damn it, running 10 laps with this thing on your back, that's too much." Hong Shan shouted. Xiao Mai secretly looked at He Yan's expression. He Yan's calm face finally cracked when he picked up the sandbag. Xiao Mai secretly heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that He Gu was also an ordinary person and wasn't omnipotent. He Yan didn't know what to say. When she was training the new recruits, in order to increase their physical strength, it was necessary to run with weights. However, it was done step by step. Most of the time, she used the sandbags she made in the He family. They increased the weight little by little. In the past, she didn't know about Xiao Ju's training methods. Now, she finally knew. Xiao Ju was so fierce right from the start. She didn't expect Xiao Ju to be so ruthless even though she had a beautiful face. She still underestimated how ruthless Xiao Ju could be. She was a ruthless person. You. Hong Shan was about to ask if she needed his help to carry the sandbag on her back when He Yan picked up the sandbag and tied it to her body. She was too thin and small. In the military camp full of men, she looked like a teenager who hadn't grown up yet. The sandbag was big and heavy, and when it was on her back, it seemed to make her shorter. She looked very pitiful and tottering. Shi Tu was a man of few words, but he couldn't stand it anymore. He only said to her, "Are you okay?" "I'm okay." He Yen smiled at him. When they saw her smiling face, they were slightly relieved. They thought that she was still a young and strong man. Although she looked thin and weak, she still had strength. He Yen cursed Xiaoju a million times in her heart. With such a load, it was naturally no problem for her to pass. However, Lady He had a delicate body. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't turn Lady He into Hercules overnight. Therefore, it was really heavy. Chapter 35. 100 people formed teams and set off in order. It was a spectacular sight to see a mighty team running around the barracks at the foot of the mountain. Although everyone was complaining and yelling, they didn't delay anything. The instructor in charge of He Yan's team was called Liang Ping, and his surname was Liang. He was as fierce and ruthless as Chief Instructor Shen. He said, "Quick, get into formation and set off." At his command, everyone followed the team and started to run with weights. He Yan was carrying such a big sandbag on her back. She felt like she was carrying a piece of sugar too, and she couldn't keep her balance. Ever since she became Lady He, she accompanied He Yunxing to the mountains to chop firewood every day. However, she could only make her weak body healthy, or at least a little stronger than other girls her age. However, Xiaoju's iron-blooded training method was really too much for her. He Yan in the past could do it, but He Yan in the present was very difficult. There were people constantly overtaking He Yan. Most of the people who came to join the army were tall and strong. Even those who weren't so tall were mostly from poor families and used to heavy labor. Although running with a sandbag was tiring, it was still okay. There were very few people as weak as He Yan. Only a few of them died on the way to Liangzhou. It could be said that in the Liangzhou guard station, at the foot of Mount Baiyue, He Yan was the weakest one in terms of physical aptitude. Shi Tu and Xiaomai ran very fast. They hunted in the mountains and often had to chase after prey. Once they caught the prey, they tied it to their bodies. They were used to running around with the prey, so it was quite easy for them. Hong Shan was probably older. After running one round, he was panting. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and said, "Sigh, this is really inhumane." He didn't hear He Yan's reply. When he turned around, He Yan was already more than 10 steps behind him. He slowed down slightly and waited for He Yan to catch up. He asked, He, can you still hold on? You look a little uncomfortable." He Yan's face was pale. Large beads of sweat rolled down from his forehead to his chin and into his clothes. Carrying a sandbag on his back, he looked just like those children on the docks in the capital who were sold by their parents to do manual labor for the gang leader. It was a pitiful sight. "I'm fine. Brother Sean, you don't have to worry about me. You run first. I can't run fast, so let me run slowly behind you." He Yan smiled and said, "You can rest in the shed after you finish running. Don't wait for me." "Why don't you tell the head instructor?" Hong Shan said hesitantly. Seeing that no one was paying attention to them, he leaned closer and whispered, "Or you can secretly run fewer laps. No one will see you anyway. I know what I'm doing." He Yan laughed. "Brother Sean, you go first. We'll meet up later." Hong Shan repeatedly confirmed that He Yan did not need help before he ran off with the sandbags. He Yan scratched his head and smiled helplessly. Did the instructor say he couldn't do it? How could that be possible? Once he entered the military, he would have to do it even if he couldn't. Secretly run fewer laps. How was that possible? Although there was no one around, the instructors were very smart. There were also hidden guards on the side of the road. If he really ran fewer laps, it would be a violation of military discipline. He would be dragged out and beaten. She knew this when she was a general. When she was a soldier, there was no reason for her to hide. But, she wiped away the sweat on her eyelids and looked at the golden sun hanging above her head. It was so hot. Someone walked out of the city guard station. Qing Lisu fanned himself with a folding fan and looked at the mountain peak covered by clouds in the distance. He said happily, "The scenery here is so good. It's 10,000 times more beautiful than the capital. Uncle has such good taste." Xiaoju followed behind him. She was wearing a black gold robe embroidered with cloud patterns. There was a long sword at her waist. Her eyes were like stars and her lips were red. She was talented and beautiful. She looked like a noble child who happened to pass by. She added a layer of color to this bitter cold place. "They're running, tsk tsk tsk." Qing Lisu shook her head. "If I had to do this, I definitely wouldn't be able to last 15 minutes. Then you should go back." What answered her was cold mockery. "Ah, what did you say? The wind is so strong, I can't hear." "Uncle, look who's here." Qing Lisu stiffly changed the topic. The person who came was Shinhan, Shin Jiaodo. He stopped in front of the two and bowed to Xiaoju. "Commander-in-Chief. How are the new recruits?" Xiaoju asked. "They look pretty good. There are a few who can't do it, but they'll get better after some practice." Shinhan replied. "What's wrong with that person?" Qing Lisu pointed in the distance. "He looks like he's about to kneel down." On the long road, there was a short young man running. Although he was running too slowly. He had already pulled away from the group in front of him. In fact, he looked so weak that the sandbag on his back was heavier than his body. "That's Liang Ping's soldier. He's running his 4th lap." "4th lap?" Xiaoju raised her eyebrows. The rest of the people had already started their 7th lap, but this person had only started his 4th lap. He was so far behind. He said lightly, "His aptitude is too poor." Qing Lisu and Shinhan looked at each other and didn't say anything. If Xiaoju said that his aptitude was too poor, it meant that he was really poor and couldn't go on the battlefield. It's okay if his aptitude is too poor. Qing Lisu thought of something and smiled. It's not bad to be a squad leader. What if his skills are good? He Yan, who was hoped that his skills would be good, was running so fast that he didn't know what to say. The sandbag on her back was really heavy, but she had to continue. She clearly understood that the current physical training was just the beginning. After a period of time, they would gradually increase the training of skills, such as bows, knives, and arrows. However, if she couldn't even endure the physical training, she wouldn't be qualified to continue the training of skills and would be directly thrown out to be a squad leader. She didn't want to be a squad leader. Near the pergola, Hong Shan finished his last lap and finally found Xiaomai and Shi resting in the pergola. He went over and sat down next to them. Xiaomai looked around and asked, "Where's Ahigo? Hasn't he come out yet?" "I don't know. I didn't see him." Hong Shan was also a little worried. Could it be that this guy can't run anymore and won't come out? Didn't you tell Ahigo to secretly run 2 laps less? Xiaomai whispered. Anyway, no one saw. I told him long ago. This guy is a stubborn donkey. He doesn't listen to me. What can I do? Hong Shan spread out his hands. As the two of them were talking, Shi suddenly said, "He's here." They followed his gaze and saw a young man running slowly towards them from the end of the long path in the forest. The sandbag on his back was too big for his body. His hair was wet in clumps, and beads of sweat slowly dripped from his forehead to his chin and sank into the soil under his feet. He ran past the pergola but didn't look in their direction. Instead, he continued to run forward and started a new lap. He's still running. Xiaomai murmured. He Yan didn't stop. Chapter 36. The 6th lap, the 7th lap. When He Yan finished the last lap, he felt as if he had just been fished out of the water. Xiaomai ran over and handed him a water bottle. Ahigo, drink some. He Yan tilted his head back and gulped down the water. While he was drinking, Liang Jiaodo walked past him. He looked at him from head to toe, shook his head, and left. His gaze clearly said that He Yan could only be a squad leader. "Why did you finish?" Hong Shan said, "You're so stubborn. I saw that there were other people who didn't run much. They're smarter than you." He Yan was so tired that he didn't want to talk. He only said, "I don't want to be a squad leader." "What's wrong with being a squad leader? Don't underestimate a squad leader. They might even live longer than us." Hong Shan didn't think much of it. "I think so too." Xiao Mai looked forward to it. "If I'm a squad leader, I can cook for everyone. I can cook more delicious food." He Yan. "If you want to cook, you should be a chef. You shouldn't be here to join the army." Xiao Mai looked at Shi Tu with an aggrieved expression. "Big brother asked me to come. What kind of people are they?" He Yan looked up at the sky and sighed in his heart. She was so tired that her legs felt like jelly. Hong Shan and Xiao Mai helped her walk forward and sighed. "It's only the first day. How long can you last?" He Yan thought to himself. "I'll last as long as I can." That day passed in exhaustion. Chief Instructor Shin's face was cold and emotionless. He caught the few soldiers who were lazing around in the afternoon and punished them in front of everyone. They screamed even more miserably than chickens. This was a warning to others. At least during the afternoon training, no one dared to laze around anymore. Just as He Yan thought, the first half of the month was physical training. It was nothing more than running with weights, standing under the sun, and lining up. Half a month later, they would begin their skill training. Once they had trained for a certain amount of time, they would begin to split up. He Yan was in the Vanguard Battalion in her previous life. She still wanted to enter the Vanguard Battalion. However, the problem was that with Xiao Ju's training method, she would be eliminated before she reached the Vanguard Battalion. After all, her physical strength was her weakness now. She thought as she ate the porridge in the bowl. The porridge was thick rice porridge with all kinds of wild vegetables, fruits, beans, and the like. Half a bucket of rice in the morning and a third of a bucket of millet for dinner. Occasionally, there would be some dough balls. If it was good, there would also be soup, pancakes and meat. However, it was just the beginning. There was only porridge. It was originally a bland meal, but because he was really too tired today, he already felt hungry. Almost no one spoke at the dining area. Everyone was engrossed in eating. If only there was wine. Hong Shan smacked his lips. "Now I finally understand why you shouldn't join the army unless you have nowhere else to go. This is not something a human would do. I want to hunt." Xiao Mai bitterly curled her lips at Shi Tu. "Big brother, I want to eat roasted rabbit." Shi Tu. "Wait a few days." He Yan found it funny. Wait a few days. Even if they waited a month, they would not have the opportunity to hunt. If they wanted to run away after entering the army camp, they would be considered deserters. Deserters would be beheaded. After dinner, everyone went to take a bath. Hong Shan hesitated for a moment and asked, "He, you really don't want to go?" After being in the sun for the whole day, he was covered in sweat. His whole body smelled of sweat and was sticky. The river was already crowded with people. Hong Shan said, "Don't be afraid. I'll hold on to you. I guarantee that you won't fall." He Yan looked troubled. "Forget it, brother Shan. When it's late, I'll go to the river to get a few buckets of water and wash them in the shallows." "Okay then." Hong Shan did not force him. "You rest first." He Yan breathed a sigh of relief after Hong Shan and the others left. This was probably one of the inconveniences of entering the army camp. As a lowly soldier, they did not have a separate room in the guard station or a separate tent in the wilderness. Taking a bath was a big problem. Because of this, she used to live a restrained life. Every night when she slept, she had to be careful not to let the cat out of the bag. However, as she gradually got promoted, she became a deputy general, and then a chief general. She had her own tent and room, so this was no longer a problem. She did not expect that she would have to walk the same path as before. He Yen lay on the bed and rested for a while. When the people who went to the river to take a bath came back one after another and everyone went to sleep, He Yen woke up when she heard Hong Shan snoring. She looked at the moon outside the window and estimated that it was already midnight. She climbed out of bed, walked past Xiaomai, rolled up her clean clothes, and sneaked out the door. Outside the guard station in Liang province, the wilderness was empty and the moon was bright and clear. Perhaps it was the border, but the moonlight was different from the one in the capital. He Yen tiptoed to the river. The river around the guard station was at the foot of Mount Baiyue. Its name was very interesting. It was called the Five Deer River. It was said that one day, a fisherman who lived by the river came back from his boat in the middle of the night. He saw a fairy in plain clothes riding a five-colored deer on the surface of the river. There were many large rocks by the river. He Yen found a piece of shirt and placed her clean clothes behind the shirt to prevent them from getting wet. Then she took off her outer clothes and walked in. What she said to Hong Shan was right. After the incident of her drowning in the pond at the Su family home, she did not dare to go near the water. Unless she had no other choice, she did not want to go to the river. Because of this, even if she went into the water, she only dared to do it in shallow water. The river water was icy cold. It was very comfortable in the hot summer. The river breeze was also refreshing. He Yen wiped her face. She felt that the tiredness from carrying the sandbag in the afternoon had been swept away. Every part of her body felt comfortable and warm. The bright moon here was as cold as frost and snow. It shone on the boundless wilderness and the wide river. It was magnificent and elegant. Mount Baiyue, Five Deer River. He Yen whispered. The names were very elegant, and they were indeed so. She looked at the silver-white moon and thought to herself that all that was missing was a beautiful fairy in plain clothes. If a fisherman were to pass by at this moment, perhaps she would be the rumored, beautiful fairy. As she thought about it, she felt that it was funny and laughed out loud. Who is it? A voice rang out in the silence. It was both strange and familiar. He Yen almost swallowed a mouthful of river water into her stomach. It can't be, right? There was still someone here at this time. The person's footsteps paused for a moment. Then, he walked in the direction of He Yen. He Yen was stunned at first. Then, she quickly hid behind a large rock in front of her. Because she was in shallow water, she was not far from the river. Therefore, she could see the person clearly. It was a young man. He wore a dark blue robe embroidered with red cranes. The embroidery on the robe looked as if it was going to fly back with the wind. He was also very outstanding. He was handsome and charming. His eyebrows were as beautiful as a painting. The long sword at his waist looked like ice and snow under the moonlight. It made his expression even colder. This handsome young man was Xiao Ju, the commander-in-chief of the Right Army. He Yen saw the person's face clearly. She wailed in her heart. Enemies were bound to meet on a narrow road. Chapter 37. Hey, don't come any closer. He Yen was afraid that the person would walk in front of her, so she quickly stuck her head out from behind the shirt. I'm naked. What are you doing? The person stopped in her tracks. He Yen sighed in relief. Based on her understanding of Xiao Ju was extremely picky. Being naked in front of him was considered a breach of etiquette, so he didn't want to dirty his eyes. Who are you? What are you doing here? Xiao Ju stared at her and asked coldly. I'm a new recruit from the garrison. I'm here to take a bath, He Yen replied. Xiao Ju heard this and a trace of mockery flashed across her eyes. She clearly didn't believe her and asked, You're here to take a bath at this hour? There were too many people at night, so I fell asleep in my room. He Yen looked at her. I'm not an adult here. I have my own room to take a bath, Indiana. If I did, who would want to take a bath in the middle of the night? I find it cold. He Yan was referring to Xiao Ju when she said adult. She hoped that Xiao Ju could understand her sarcasm. Unfortunately, Xiao Ju didn't show any signs of guilt after hearing her words. She only looked at her calmly. He Yan lowered her body into the river and asked, "Who are you?" I'll just pretend to be a new recruit who doesn't know anything about the world. It'll be more convincing that way. Xiao Ju didn't answer her and instead said, "If you find it cold, then don't join the army." Was she refuting what she said just now? He Yan looked at her clothes behind the huge rock. If Xiao Ju didn't leave, she would have to stay in the water. However, if she stayed in the water for too long, Xiao Ju would be suspicious. "I joined the army for a reason," He Yan said. Xiao Ju looked at her and raised her eyebrows. "What's your purpose?" "Of course it's to build a career, get promoted and get rich, and become someone like General Feng Yun who achieved success at a young age. Then we can go home and build a house, marry a wife, marry the most beautiful and virtuous lady, give birth to the most adorable children, have many children and grandchildren, and live a prosperous life." What a good life. He Yan showed a yearning expression. As soon as he said that, Xiao Ju's eyes turned cold. She scolded him coldly, "How vulgar." He Yan was overjoyed in his heart. She deliberately threw the name of General Feng Yun together with the wishes of ordinary men in the world to deliberately disgust him. Xiao Ju was such a proud person, he must feel humiliated. What's wrong with that? He Yan looked serious. This is what you should do when you join the army. Be the happiest man. Xiao Ju glanced at her as if she couldn't bear to listen to her ravings. She left in a huff, as if she didn't want to talk to her anymore. He Yan said from behind him, "Hey, brother, can I trouble you to help me throw the clothes behind the rock over here? Just give me a hand." Xiao Ju naturally wouldn't help her get the clothes. He Yan waited until he was far away and completely out of sight before she quickly washed up and ran to the shore to change her clothes. The moonlight was silent, as if it didn't see what happened. He Yan carried the dirty clothes and walked back, but he thought about the scene when he saw Xiao Ju just now. At this time, Xiao Ju probably didn't come here to do anything. Perhaps she just came out for a walk. After all, the night was so beautiful. Speaking of which, He Yan and Xiao Ju hadn't seen each other for many years. The last time they met at the racecourse, he was afraid that Xiao Ju would find out, so he hurriedly lowered his head and didn't see clearly how different Xiao Ju was now. It was rare to see him clearly just now. It seemed that he was different from what he remembered. She knew that Xiao Ju was born handsome and beautiful in the past. Many young girls would rush forward just to look at him. But people actually became more and more beautiful. She didn't know what this person ate when he grew up, but now it seemed that he was even more charming than before. If Xiao Ju was said to have a bit of youthful charm, then that charm was completely gone now. He was like a fine jade, like a sword in a box, faintly shining. But his temperament was much colder than before. He Yan walked slowly. That year, she had a big quarrel with the He family and then joined the army. She didn't know what happened in the Xianchang restaurant. At that time, Xiao Ju was still the Xiao family's young master and everything was normal. After she joined the army, a few years later, she learned about the situation of the Xiao family's second young master from the people around her. Xiao Ju's father, Xiao Zhongwu, was a brave general of Dawei. He was best at winning with a few people. Just like Dawei, when they attacked Dawei, he was ambushed by the enemy at the Battle of Mingshui and died at the hands of the enemy leader. After General Xiao died, Xiao Ju took over the army and continued to lead the army to attack Dawei. He Yan was 15 years old when she joined the army. When Xiao Ju joined the army, he was only 1 year older than her. She didn't know what exactly happened, but she knew that Xiao Ju was only 16 years old at that time. It was definitely not simple for him to take over the army from his father's hands. Not to mention the imperial family, the Xiao family's political enemies would not let go of this opportunity to hit them when they were down. If Xiao Ju was defeated, then the entire Xiao family would be defeated as well. As a military family, the Xiao family would definitely not be able to survive with just a civil official, eldest young Master Xiao. Fortunately, the heavens were on his side. Not only did Xiao Ju win, he won beautifully. He defeated De Wei and brought the enemy's general's head back to the capital. At this point, he established the title of Young Killer, Commander Jade-Faced. War was the fastest way to sharpen a person's heart. All the edges and sharpness had to be withdrawn in the face of life and death. Perhaps Xiao Ju still retained the arrogance and frivolity of the capital's nobles in the past. But now, he didn't have any of that. He was a more outstanding, more indifferent, more unfathomable, and more difficult to deal with Xiao Ju. He Yan walked to the door. Everyone in the room was sleeping soundly and no one noticed her. She placed her clothes at the foot of the bed and lay down. She closed her eyes and her heart was calm. Fortunately, Xiao Ju was not the only one who had grown these years. She was the same as Xiao Ju. They weren't far apart. Chapter 38. The next day, they woke up at 5 in the morning and ran with weights as usual. The recruits were miserable. Because of yesterday's events, they still had to check on other things. The recruits were all dressed in red. When they woke up in the morning, they couldn't be disheveled. This included the messy beds they slept on at night. The next morning, they had to be neatly arranged. If there was a messy bed, they had to add an extra circle. Who could stand it if they added one round after another? Amidst the cries and screams, the recruits' appearance and military discipline were quickly fixed. It had only been half a month. Although the recruits didn't know how to set up formations with swords and arrows, they already looked decent. He Yan sighed in his heart. Although Xiao Ju was a bit evil, her methods were quite impressive. Compared to military governor Xiao, He Yan felt that his previous methods of training soldiers were simply too benevolent. As the saying goes, if you don't lead soldiers, then you won't keep money. It seemed that he still had to learn more from Xiao Ju. As the recruits ran in circles, the instructors took advantage of the gaps to talk. Head instructor Shen Han looked at Liang Ping and asked, "Why don't I see the weakest kid in your team?" Over the past few days, everyone knew that the weakest kid in the Liangzhou guards was one of Liang Jiaodo's recruits. He was thin and small, and his physical strength was extremely poor. Every morning, when he ran in the morning, he would fall behind the others. It was fine if it was 1 or 2 days, but after 3 days, almost everyone knew that there was such a person. It could be said that he was notoriously weak. "You said He Yan?" Liang Ping pointed at the mountain path in the distance and said, "He's in front. Look, the one running with the middleman." Shen Han looked over and saw a youth running forward with a sandbag on his back. Although everyone was dressed in red, the youth was unusually thin and short, so it could be seen at a glance. Shen Han was a bit surprised. He didn't fall behind. How could that be? Liang Ping's face showed some complicated emotions. This kid is very strong-willed. Speaking of which, Liang Ping was not optimistic about He Yan at first. To be honest, he had been an instructor for many years and had seen many new recruits. He could tell whether or not they could become a fierce soldier just by looking at them. He Yan's physical aptitude was really too poor. Perhaps he had been pampered since he was young, so it was obvious that he did not have much strength. On the first day of his morning run, Liang Ping made a decision in his heart: I can only be a team leader. He didn't expect this kid to have such a strong personality despite his poor health. Even though he was dragging the tail every day, he still ran with the team. Liang Ping also noticed that from the first day until now, he had never tried to slack off. He had been running seriously. If a rich young master from a declining family were to be a small soldier, it would already be impressive to have such willpower and perseverance. What's more, He Yan was not doing useless work. She seemed to have mastered some kind of trick, or gradually began to adapt to this kind of weight-bearing long-distance running. In the beginning, she was lagging behind by a lot of laps. Gradually, she fell behind less and less. Now, she could barely keep up with the team. Liang Ping even had an illusion that if this continued and ran for a few more days, he might even be the one running in the front. As he was thinking, he heard Shen Han's voice from beside him. What's the use of being strong-willed? Aptitude is aptitude. Even if he can barely keep up with the running, the skill training in the future will still be too difficult for him. I don't know if he can pass the skill training. Before the skill training, the last morning run was to evaluate the physical fitness and potential of each new recruit. If there were too many people who fell behind, it would be impossible for them to even pass the skill training. Manpower was limited, so it was impossible to allocate so many troops to people who were not worthy. War was cruel. Before the cruel war, they could only choose those who could bear the cruelty. I think he can, Liang Ping said. Shen Han looked at him, and the other instructors around him also looked at him. Someone said, Liang Jiaodou, are you sure? Don't make a mistake. You have to know that after so many years, this kind of weak person can't even survive on the battlefield. Even so. Liang Ping smiled and said, you also know that the spirit has been tempered hundreds of times. It is sharp and strong. Who can be sure about this kind of thing? He looked at He Yan. The young man's forehead was full of sweat. In the hot summer, his companions who were running with him gritted their teeth. Most of them looked impatient and annoyed. He was the only one who smiled and did not seem to have any complaints. This kind of willpower was really hard to come by. He Yan did not know that he had become the topic of discussion among the instructors. She finished her last lap and put away the sandbag. Hong Shan punched her on the shoulder. Hey, good boy. You're really something. Hong Shan rubbed his chin and looked at him. Now you can even keep up with us. Are you happy now that you don't have to be the leader anymore? He Yan laughed heartily. That's great. Seeing that she looked much better than a few days ago, Hong Shan was happy for her. At this time, Xiaomai waved at them from afar. He Gu, Brother Shan, hurry up. There are meat buns today. After being here for so long, there was finally meat for them. He Yan heard that and immediately salivated. Hong Shan also licked his lips and said, we finally have a good meal. Let's go, let's go. There was porridge in the iron pot, and everyone got a bowl. In the big wooden bucket beside them were steaming meat buns. They could smell the aroma from afar. The soldier in charge of distributing the meat buns stood in front of the wooden bucket. Everyone could get one. He Yan also got one. She held the bowl of porridge. There were no seats around, so she wanted to find a shady place to sit down and eat the porridge. From afar, she saw Xiaomai waving at her from under a tree. It seemed that she had found a good spot to enjoy the cool air. He Yan was about to leave. She had only walked halfway when suddenly, someone passed by her and bumped into her shoulder heavily. She staggered and spilled the half bowl of porridge in her hand. She did not hold the meat bun tightly and it rolled down. He Yan was about to reach out to catch it when a hand reached out and snatched the meat bun away. She stood still. In front of her stood a tall man with a mustache. There was an old scar from his left forehead to his cheek. At first glance, he looked strong and powerful. He took the meat bun as if it was a matter of course. He did not even look at He Yan and continued to walk forward. A leg was placed in front of the man. The man paused and looked at the person in front of him. The young man retracted his leg. There was still a polite smile on his face, as if he did not understand what had just happened. She said, "Brother, you seem to have taken the wrong thing. The meat bun in your hand is mine." The scarred man looked at him strangely. After a moment, he suddenly laughed as if he had heard a funny joke. He opened his mouth and said in a hoarse voice, "Do you know what you are saying?" I said, the young man said calmly, "The meat bun in your hand is mine." Chapter 39. "I said, the bun in your hand is mine," she said. Before she finished speaking, the man laughed sinisterly and said, "Kid, don't look for trouble. I just want to take back what's mine." The other party looked at her. The young man was very frail. Even the red uniform of the army seemed too wide and long on him. He was also shorter than the average boy. Standing here, he looked like a child who had not grown up yet. A child yelling at him was like an ignorant puppy barking at a wolf. There was nothing but ridiculous about it. "Yours?" The scar-faced man grabbed the bun with disdain. Before Yen could react, he threw it into his mouth. The bun was not big to begin with, so he swallowed it in 2 or 3 bites. He was like a beast that could not wait to eat its prey. After eating, he looked at Yen provocatively and said with a strange smile, "Yours? Who can testify? What can you do to me?" The bun was already in his stomach. Yen could not cut open his stomach and take the bun out. After the man finished speaking, he looked at Yen's helpless expression happily. He took the bowl of porridge in his hand and walked forward unhurriedly. "What can I do to you?" Yen muttered to herself. After a moment, she smiled, turned around, and walked toward the scar-faced man. The scar-faced man was bending over to drink the porridge in his bowl. Yen kicked his knee. The scar-faced man's legs went weak and he almost knelt down. He staggered a few steps and stood up. However, the porridge in his hand spilled on the ground. There was nothing left. Seeing this, the scar-faced man turned his head angrily. When he saw Yen, he gnashed his teeth and said, "You? Me?" Yen laughed and said, "I did it." "Who can testify? What can you do to me?" The young man's eyes were full of slyness and a hint of provocation. It made the scar-faced man furious. The scar-faced man raised his fist and was about to step forward. "Hey, what do you want?" At this moment, a voice came from the side. It was Hung Shan and Shirtu. When Xiaomai saw Yen talking to Scarface for a long time, she guessed that something must have happened. She called her brother and Hung Shan over. Hung Shan and Shirtu didn't look as easy to bully as Yen. Both of them looked strong. Scarface didn't act rashly. He just snorted coldly and glared at Yen, saying, "Just you wait." Then he turned around and walked away. His tone was extremely vicious and full of threats. "What's wrong with you?" Hung Shan asked. "What happened?" "He snatched my meat bun, so I gave him my vegetable porridge. It's fair." Yen tried to put it simply. Hung Shan understood as soon as he heard this. He looked at Yen, sighed, and said, "Why are you angry with him? You should have endured it just now." "Why should I?" Yen asked. When she was in the army, she often encountered such things. In the army camp, it was common for the strong to bully the weak. When she first entered the army camp, it was common for her to be robbed of her food. If it weren't for her comrades who pitied her and gave her a share of their food, she might have starved to death. The military instructor in the army camp could prevent conflicts on the surface, but it was impossible to prevent such robberies in the dark. Moreover, she was too weak at that time. She was so weak that even the military instructor didn't care about her, let alone uphold justice for her. Later on, when she became strong, no one dared to rob her of her food. Later on, when she became the commander, she ordered her recruits to never rob others of their food or bully the weak. Once discovered, they would be punished by military order. Who would have thought that after her rebirth, she would encounter the same thing again? But this time, she was no longer the new recruit who trembled with fear and didn't dare to voice out her grievances. Even if Hung Shan and Shirtu didn't appear just now, it would be more than enough for her to teach this scar-faced man a lesson. "That man is Wang Ba," Hung Shan said. "He used to be a bandit, but I don't know how he ended up joining the army." He's the fiercest one among Liang Jiaodo's subordinates. I heard from others that this kind of person kills people like flies. Today, you provoked him, and he holds a grudge in his heart. In the future, he'll definitely cause trouble for you. Sure too, and I can't be by your side every day. If he takes advantage of any loopholes, your life will be very difficult. I can't just accept that he robbed me of my food. Brother Shan, you have to believe that if he robbed me once, there will be a second time. If he comes to rob me every day, how can I live? He Yan said. There's no such thing as unfair in the world. Nothing in the world is fair. The one who spoke was the usually taciturn Shi Tu. He looked at He Yan and gently shook his head. It seemed that he didn't agree with her actions. You're too impulsive. If there's no fairness, then fight for it yourself. If you can't fight for fairness because you're too weak, then work hard to become stronger. He Yan smiled. If the fist is the law here, then let him come to me. I promise. I'll let him know what fairness is. The young man spoke in a relaxed manner. His expression was calm, and there seemed to be a faint smile in his clear eyes. The wind blew, making his hair tie flutter. He didn't look like a soldier, but like a young master parading on the streets of the capital. She wanted to tease him by saying, newborn calves aren't afraid of tigers. But when she met his eyes, she couldn't say it. Was it really true that newborn calves aren't afraid of tigers? He was confident and didn't seem to be reckless. Shi Tu and Hong Shan didn't say anything else. The two accompanied He Yan to the bottom of the tree. Xiao Mai knew that He Yan's meat bun was stolen. She felt that it was a pity, but in the end, she clumsily comforted him. It's okay, He Go. We'll be able to go up the mountain in a few days. I'll make a few slingshots to shoot birds, or a few traps to catch rabbits. When the time comes, we'll eat wild game. It's much better than the meat in the meat bun. He Yan couldn't help but laugh. After finishing the porridge in the bowl, she leaned against the tree trunk and rested her head with her hands behind her head. The sun lazily shone down, and there was a rare moment of coolness under the tree. She closed her eyes, and her mind was in a whirl. Although it was a pity to lose a meat bun, she didn't have to be so calculative about it. When the army was marching to war, sometimes the soldiers' pay couldn't keep up, and they were forced to defend the city. Not to mention meat bun, not to mention vegetable porridge. Sometimes, they even had to eat tree bark and grass. The worst time was when she ate guanyin clay. She ate until her stomach was bloated, and she risked her life to defend the city. Compared to that time, she was already very happy. But, the wind blew past her cheeks. He Yan curled up the corners of her mouth. If she guessed correctly, it would take at most 5 days. After 5 days, the skill training would begin. Some people would be assigned to be the vanguard. With her current physical strength, she probably had the qualifications to participate in the skill training. But, how could she prove her worth in the shortest time possible and prove that she was qualified to join the vanguard? This was a problem. Chapter 40. He Yan's guess was right. 3 days later, when they were running with sandbags on their backs, Liang Jiaodo shouted from the front, from tomorrow onwards, you will run 5 laps around the barracks. The rest of the time, you will be doing weapon training. So today, you all better run well. If you don't run well, you won't get to eat lunch. Everyone was elated when they heard this. Compared to running with sandbags on a hot summer day, weapon training sounded much easier and more like something a new recruit should do. To be able to end this purgatory and enter a new phase perhaps meant that they were already gradually becoming decent soldiers of the Great Way. He Yan understood the meaning behind Liang Jiaodo's words. Today was the last test. If they didn't run well and obviously couldn't keep up, they wouldn't be qualified to do weapon training anymore. He Yan bent over to carry the sandbags. At this time, someone passed by her and suddenly bumped into her. She stood up straight and looked. It was the scarred-faced Wang Ba who had snatched her meat bun a few days ago. Wang Ba looked at him and revealed a sinister smile. Kid, after today, you will be a squad leader. Your good days will come to an end. He Yen shrugged. I don't understand. Your two brothers won't always follow you. A squad leader. He lowered his voice and a trace of violence flashed in his eyes. No one will care if I kill you. Then you can try. He Yen threw the sandbags on his back and smiled at him. By the way, I will not be a squad leader. Never. After he finished speaking, he didn't care about Wang Ba's expression and turned around to go up the long road. Xiao Mai followed him anxiously and asked, He Gu, he didn't make things difficult for you just now, right? How could he? He Yen smiled and replied. We just chatted for a while. I see. Xiao Mai laughed again. He Gu, you're amazing. You're not even panting when you're running with us, and you're running so fast. Xiao Mai and Shi Tu grew up in the mountains. As hunters, they had to go out hunting every day. Once they went out, they would spend the whole day hunting. Therefore, they had good stamina and could run very fast. He Yan's initial weakness was seen by everyone, but now, she was becoming more energetic and relaxed day by day. It made people wonder if she had secretly taken some kind of elixir. Is that so? He Yan nodded seriously. I really do have potential. On the other side, the instructors who were observing the situation gathered together. Half a month of daily long-distance running was not only to train the physical strength of the recruits, but also to judge the aptitude of the recruits. They would record every day, and today would be the last time. After today, long-distance running would no longer be a means to judge one's aptitude. Instead, it would become an ordinary training. This was because being able to train with weapons meant that this person already had the qualifications to become a Dewey recruit. They would not die before the war because of their physical condition. There were strong and weak people in the military camp, and the contrast between the strong and the weak was even more obvious. Those with good aptitude would stand out from the start, while those with poor aptitude would be an eyesore. This was a very unfair thing. After all, no one could change the way they were born. However, there was an accident during this process. Old Liang. Someone patted Liang Jiaodo's shoulder. He Yan in your team is really a talent. He Yan was that accident. Her aptitude was very poor, and she received a unanimous evaluation from the instructors from the start. Even when she was assigned as a squad leader, everyone was afraid that she would get sick from the fire. However, she was getting lighter and lighter day by day. Now, she was able to steadily keep up with the team, and was even at the front of the team. This was a miracle. Ropes can cut wood, and dripping water can penetrate stone. Liang Jiaodo was very proud. I've said it before. I, Liang Ping, will not make a mistake. This kid's determination is hard to come by. He can do anything well. Don't boast. The person who poured cold water on him was called Du Mao. He was also one of the instructors. He said disapprovingly, you know that aptitude is aptitude. What did he rely on to keep up with the team? It was hard work. This was the truth. Everyone looked at the youth who was running with the team. He was of the right age, looked optimistic, and was very likable. When he ran, he was very well behaved. He rarely spoke to the people around him, and he ran very seriously. In short, he looked like he was very serious about what he was doing. He worked very hard to be able to do this. Other people don't need to work hard. Maybe they can do it with just 1 point. Du Mao said, right now, he's just running with sandbags. In the future, the weapons training and formation exercises will only get more complicated. He also needs to put in more effort than others. This way, he will never stand out. He can only be an ordinary soldier. I advise you to put more effort into the recruits with good aptitude in your team. Don't pay too much attention to that kid. Du Mao shook his head. It's meaningless. I can't win an argument with you. I'm too lazy to argue with you. Liang Ping was not very happy with his words. He took his spear and left. However, as he walked, he began to mutter in his heart. As instructors, they had led many soldiers. In the end, those who could survive on the battlefield or make contributions were usually those who performed amazingly at the beginning and had outstanding qualities. That young man could only work hard, but was it really useful to work hard? He Yen finished running for the day in one breath. He received his meal and finished it. In the afternoon, Liang Jiaodo suddenly came and picked a dozen soldiers to follow him. Hey, those people seem to be going to be cooks, Xiao Mai said. But do cooks need so many people? He Yen smiled and shook her head. It's just a title. Not all cooks. Some do other things. In short, they don't have to go to the front line to fight. That's good. Hong Shan stretched. They don't have to fight with their lives. Isn't it good to live? But Gu is happy this time, Xiao Mai said mischievously. They don't have to be cooks. He Yen didn't want to be cooks. This was something everyone knew. She didn't refute. She just smiled and said, congratulations. Are you going to have a chance to perform soon? Hong Shan glanced at her and said teasingly, you can show off your skills in the upcoming weapon drill. Well, not really. He Yen thought for a while before answering. She was good at swordsmanship, archery, horsemanship, and running with a spear were not difficult. After running for so long, climbing mountains and charging were not a problem. The only difficulty was probably the crossbow. The crossbow required a lot of hand strength. It was difficult to pull it without a strong body. With Lady He's current physique, it might be a little difficult. However, Xiao Ju probably wouldn't use a crossbow when training soldiers, right? She thought. She thought wrong. Chapter 41. The next day, just as Liang Jiaodo had said, they ran half of the laps and finished early. It wasn't even time for lunch yet. Then, all the recruits were brought to the training field. The training field next to the Liangzhou guard station was huge. It was probably because there was a large open field at the foot of the mountain that could accommodate everyone. He Yen looked around and thought that this was indeed a good place to train. It was noon and the sun was high up in the sky. There wasn't even a trace of wind. The flags on the high platform were stuck to the flagpoles, making the recruits look listless from the sun. From today onwards, you will begin weapon training. Chief Instructor Shin slammed his long spear on the ground. Everyone was shocked and looked at him attentively. Do you see that open field? Shin Han pointed his long spear to the north. Next to the open field near the weapon rack, there were dozens of crossbows in rows, staring at them aggressively. 100 steps in front of the crossbows, there were arrow targets neatly arranged. From today onwards, all of you will start learning how to use the bow. Chief Instructor Shin ordered. The following days were once again packed with students. For a moment, everyone didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Wow! Archery is my favorite. Xiao Mai was probably the happiest. Brother, it's our turn to show off. He Yen asked Shi Tu, the bows you use for hunting aren't this heavy, right? Shi Tu looked at the crossbow for a while and shook his head. No, it's lighter than this. It's also not made from cow horns. I made it from bamboo. It's pretty much the same, Xiao Mai said happily. Suddenly, she thought of something and asked He Yen, He Gu, can we borrow this bow to hunt rabbits in the mountains? He Yen. Train hard, don't dream about it. As usual, the recruits were divided into teams. Each team was led by the head instructor to practice crossbow. The head instructor demonstrated first. He pulled the bow and released an arrow. The arrow flew into the middle of the target with a whoosh sound. It was very firm. The recruits burst into cheers, and the head instructor had a pleased expression on his face. He Yan could not help but praise him in his heart. Liang Ping was not a fake. He was really capable. Such a person would be an expert on the battlefield. The soldiers in the barracks were all very excited and eager to give it a try. One after another, they came up to test the bows. Some people were born with great strength and could draw their bows to the fullest. Although they couldn't shoot accurately, they could shoot far. Some of them had already touched a bow and arrow before, so they were more familiar with the posture. Most of the recruits had strength but no accuracy. Their arrows were crooked, and before the arrows could reach the target, they would break in midair and fall to the ground. After all, he had drawn his bow and shot an arrow. Hong Shan also went up to try. He was born strong and could draw the bow well, but his accuracy was not good. He fell down when he reached the edge of the target. He didn't think much of it and even felt very satisfied. He nodded and said, "Not bad, not bad." Shi Tu and Xiao Mai followed closely behind. Shi Tu's hand strength was steadier and stronger. The arrow flew out of his hand with a whoosh sound and did not hit the target. Although it did not hit the target, it was still in the middle. Liang Jiaodo looked at him in surprise and asked, "What's your name? Have you touched a bow before?" "My name is Zhong Shi Tu. I used to be a hunter," Shi Tu said in a deep voice. "No wonder." Liang Ping nodded with satisfaction. He was naturally happy that there was a good seedling in the team. Xiao Mai went up to him and said, "My name is Zhong Xiao Mai. I'm his younger brother. I used to be a hunter too." "Oh." Liang Jiaodo was a little expectant. He said, "Why don't you try?" Xiao Mai followed Shi Tu's example and pulled the bow. However, this time, he did not have his big brother's impressive ability. The arrow he shot just happened to miss the target. Liang Ping was speechless. Xiao Mai rubbed his nose and stepped back resentfully. He Yan was a little amused. Just as she was thinking about whether she should give it a try, someone walked out faster than her. "Whoa," Hong Shan whispered beside He Yan, "It's him." It was Wang Ba. They didn't notice that Wang Ba was actually a soldier under Liang Jiaodo. He walked forward, rolled up his sleeves to his elbows, spat twice on his palms, and picked up the bow. He Yan looked at him. His arms were very tight, and she could vaguely see his strong honey-colored skin. He was a very strong person. Wang Ba was not in a hurry to shoot the arrow like the other recruits. He took a deep breath and aimed at the center of the target. "This way." He Yan calculated in his heart. It was probably not his first time using a bow. Like Shi Tu, he was a good archer who often touched the bow. Finally, the taut bowstring let out a clanging sound, and the arrow went straight to the center of the target. Everyone only saw a white light flash in front of their eyes, and then, the grass target in front of them was hit by the force of the arrow, and fell to the ground with a bang. The arrow did not hit the center of the target. Only a little bit of the arrow feather was exposed. Not only did the arrow penetrate the grass target, but it also brought the target down. He Yan could not help but sigh in his heart. This was a very amazing arrow. Wang Ba was strong and steady. His aim was good, and he could keep his composure. It was very rare. Liang Jiaodo looked at Wang Ba with a strange gaze. In this batch of recruits, there was Shi Tu Zhong and Wang Ba. They were really good at crossbows. Wang Ba put away his bow. He did not immediately walk away. Instead, he walked in front of He Yan in 2 steps. The scar-faced man crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at He Yan with a gloating expression. He said, "It's your turn." It would have been better if he did not say that. Once he said that, many people around them looked at He Yan. Facing Wang Ba's provocative gaze, He Yan walked forward. The bow was a high-quality horn bow. It was very smooth to the touch. It had probably been used countless times in the past. There were traces of it. He Yan touched it bit by bit. His time in the army suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. The last time she used a crossbow was when she was still in the General Feihong. Many years had passed in a flash. Liang Ping looked at He Yan with a strange expression. He knew that a crossbow was different from other weapons. It required a lot of hand strength. Judging from He Yan's physique and previous performance, he would not be able to perform well. But, this was a very hard-working recruit. People always looked forward to the unknown. Liang Ping was also very conflicted. Why are you touching it? Don't waste other people's time. Wang Ba sneered. Why don't you show us your superb archery skills? He Yan picked up the bow and put his fingers on the arrow. After a moment, he put down the bow. What does a higu mean? Xiao Mai asked, puzzled. Why did he put down the bow when he had not started to draw it? Was there something wrong? Why aren't you moving? Wang Ba was dissatisfied. Move it. No need. He Yan looked calm. I can't draw this bow. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.